Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino, that Perino Rieko, here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and today it is time to go back into the magical world of Magic the Gathering, because Zendikar is rising, and we have to talk about it. And because we are discussing Magic the Gathering, I am joined, as always, by my magical co-host in these shows, Magic Master Kyle Moran.
Hey, Gino, how's it going?
Good. It's going well. How goes streaming with World Gorger Dragon?
It's been good. Like, we've been growing. Like, now it's funny. I'm kind of like at this point have been accepted into the cast of legacy streamers. So I'm just the Gorger guy now. So I don't know. I don't know. I guess that's cool. I don't know. Like, it's definitely not a bad thing. So yeah, it's been good. It's been going great.
You won a legacy challenge with World Gorger Dragon?
That I did. It was pretty funny. I totally was supposed to lose that finals match, but my opponent tapped out 2 turns they were not supposed to, and I was able to win one of those 2 turns. But yeah, it was crazy. Like, apparently winning a challenge just means your stream doubles in size, so I should probably try and do that again.
Yeah, just keep winning. The secret is winning.
Yeah, except it's a balance though. It's a balance, because if you win too much, then people are like, "Oh, is this deck too good?" And then they ban your deck, and then it's like, "Uh-oh."
Yeah.
But I don't think Gorger's that good. Actually, I know Gorger ain't that good, so we're chilling.
If all you care about is winning, then you're going to end up in a spot where you're playing different decks, and then you're not the Gorger guy. You're just the person who streams Legacy sometimes, and then you don't have a niche.
Exactly. Like there's already people like who are I would just say are better streamers than me who stream just general legacy content. So let them do their thing and I'll do my thing. But it's been really awesome too. I've been able to have like since like the channel's kind of gained its clout, I've been able to have like some pretty awesome guests on, and that's not going to stop. Like we're going to continue having really cool. Like I had one of the best ones I had was Goblin Lackey.
Yes.
Yeah, he came on the stream. We played Goblin's Dragon, and it was like one of the best streams I've ever had. It was so much fun. He is such a fun person to have on stream. And like when I was explaining to him, he's like, "So like, how do we win from here?" I'm like, "Well, we just entomb for Goblin Matron. We make infinite mana. We infinite mana. We entomb for Goblin Matron, then get Pashlik Mons and activate Pashlik Mons like 100 times." And he's like, "What? What did you do to my Goblin stack?"
Infinite flickers, baby.
Oh yeah, it was all the mana.
If people do want to watch your World Gorger Dragon stream, what is your Twitch?
Yeah, World Gorger 115 is twitch.tv/World Gorger 115. You can find all the stuff there. We also have a Discord server, which is that's not really the stream, but if you're interested in World Gorger Dragon Legacy, we have a Discord server for it, and I'm sure you can find that just like World Gorger Dragon Discord, because it's not like there's multiple of these things, so. Yeah. If that's at all interesting, definitely check it out.
Excellent. So just before we get into the Zendikar stuff, reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. That'll get you access to our Discord, where you can hang out, talk with the hosts. Kyle, you sometimes swing by. You sometimes look at stuff. So yeah, we've got Magic discussion in there on a semi-regular basis, if you are one of the listeners who tunes in for this specifically. And so, without further ado, let's get into Zendikar Rising. So, Zendikar Rising, it's the third return to Zendikar, which is known as the Adventure/Lands plane. It's always been a Lands Matter set. It's always been about, in some cases, tribal. The tribal's always been ally tribal, but this set they've taken the tribal in some slightly different directions. The power level on Zendikar sets have usually been pretty good, but that's not inherent in Zendikar. And we have some returning mechanics and a big new mechanic that I think we'll save for the end, because we'll have to talk about the power level of it a whole lot.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I think though that this Zendikar set kind of has a very, at least from the last time we were at Zendikar, a pretty big tonal shift where like the whole last Zendikar set was like, oh my god, the Eldrazi are destroying everything. Oh Jesus, we got to stop them. And people didn't really like that. And now when we come back to Zendikar, like I think there's one card in all of Zen, or maybe two. Okay, no. I think it's just one card in the entire set that references the Eldrazi. Like they have basically been like erased from Zendikar. Like not like obviously they were killed in the last set. But, like no, there's like not even like it's almost like we're just like pretending they didn't exist anymore. It feels like, which is honestly I'm all about it. Like it's more adventure, more D&D kind of style now, which is I think cooler. Like who actually liked the Void?
It's going to be very interesting to see this set in the actual D&D set in the same standard at the same time, because this Zendikar was always the Magic the Gathering knockoff of D&D in a lot of cases.
And now we're just going to actually have that was why I remember seeing that announcement. Like it's like wow, we're actually just doing a D&D set, like legit. That's kind of I don't know why I find that kind of crazy. Is this like that's like the first actual crossover, right? Like they did like Ikoria with like the Ultimate Arts, but like this is like an actual set that's being crossed over.
They've done crossover cards, single cards, because Hasbro owns both D&D and Magic. So there was Sword of Dungeons and Dragons that was a special unstable card. There was also a Dinobot, Transformers crossover card. So like things like this have happened before, but never in Black Border. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. And we did get an announcement of like the next few sets. So we've got Zendikar. Next set's going to be a Viking World. Then there's going to be a fake Harry Potter, like Wizarding World, and then the D&D crossover.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Like I don't know. Like I guess like we don't see. Gotta wait till we see the actual cards, but definitely a pretty cool lineup. Like I don't know, compared to like random stuff that they've done over the years past. So. I honestly think that the Magic's been on kind of a rough turn this like last year, where it's been the cards have been a little bit too good, there's been a lot of bans, a lot of upset people. But I think I don't want to say it and be wrong because like easily could be, but I think things are starting to get like kind of the what I'm trying to say. The gauge is kind of shifting a little bit away from like that brokenness every single set.
I don't know because this set doesn't seem to me like it actually tones it down that much. I think it facially it looks less broken at first glance. There were not very many cards that I looked at and went, well, that's just going to get banned. Like once upon a time, we read it on this podcast and I was like, why is this card in this set? We know this is going to get banned in less than a month. Why are we even going through this? It's a free spell. And then it was. This set, there are more things that I think we will need to play with a little bit more to reveal that they are entirely broken. But I think that the potential is certainly there in this set to be as broken as many of the sets that we've seen in recent memory, though at least it might take exploration. Oko did not take exploration.
No, it didn't. It was like, hey, look, there's this card called Gilded Goose that makes mana, and then there's this card that's like ridiculous for 3 mana. Wow, that's pretty good. And that was it. We were done. Put Aether Gust in. Oh, it got so bad. Like I can actually, I can give my insight on this because that was like the Pro Tour that I really tested hard for, and it was like it just kept getting more and more inbred. Like it started, we figured out, okay, Goose into Oko, that's the best thing you could be doing. Then it's like, okay, how do we beat Goose and Oko? Noxious Grasp, Aether Gust. Then it's like, okay, how do we beat Noxious Grasp, Aether Gust, Veil of Summer? So then there were games where you just go fucking turn 1 or turn 2 Oko, then your opponent goes like to kill it. And then you Aether Gust the kill, or sorry, not Aether, you Veil Summer the kill spell, and it's like, why is this happening game 1?
Yeah, these are all these sideboard cards are actually all entirely main deckable because how the hell could you not? They're free rolls if all you're worried about is playing the mirror.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like the downside of the cards is like if you're not playing against those decks, and if you're not playing against those decks, then you just have the upside of playing against those decks when you're playing the better deck.
Yeah,
so.
You can actually, it turns out, have 10 cards that don't do anything against your opponent if the 20 cards that actually do things are just so unbalancedly strong that it doesn't matter that you've stuffed your deck full of literal do-nothings.
Yeah. I'll speak on that note too. Well, this isn't really ban discussion. It's more rotation. So thank God Nis is gone. I am so tired of playing against Nissa who shakes the world. That card was just... Because that card was also, like, subtly broken in Standard. And
I think I put that in my underrated card in green when we were looking at War of the Spark. And it's like, doesn't this just double your mana for 5 and then pressure your opponent and have a ton of loyalty? Well, I mean, it doesn't double your mana as much as Wilderness Wreck, so maybe it's fine.
Well, turns out they're both kind of broken, but I don't know. I felt pretty good about that War of the Spark one. I feel like that was the one set review that I really just hit the nail on the head. Like, I don't always hit. Oh, I definitely don't know if that was the one though. Calling out Teferi Time Raveler is the best card in that set. Felt pretty good about that one.
Yeah, if it wasn't, it was very close. And I think most of the cards that we called out ended up needing to be banned, or at least were in the ballpark. So now we turn our attention to Zendikar, see if we can repeat that magic. I think that Zendikar, let's start with just going over the mechanics. So the first mechanic, simplest returning mechanic, is Landfall. Landfall is just a bit of kind of reminder text. It's not a keyword. What are the two? There's keyword and...
I think it's Evergreen is what you're looking for, maybe?
No.
Or...
There's one that's a mechanic that's actually, like, the word has mechanical meaning, like mutate. And then there's the ones where it's like, we put this little thing here that lets you know that it triggers off of the same thing, but actually it's not.
Yeah, I understand the distinction, but I don't know the word you're looking for.
It's keyword, and then there's another distinction. But regardless, it's a mechanic where everything that has landfall has a trigger that triggers on a land entering the battlefield under your control. And the trigger will be different depending on what the card is. So some of them will get, +1/+1 or +2/+2 when you play a land. Some will get counters. Some will make tokens. All you need to know is that you want to get lands entering the battlefield. And so most of the tension with the mechanic is just, can I get multiple land drops in a turn? Do I want to play this before I attack? Do I want to play this after I attack to get max value out of the land drop? And just kind of juggling that. So it's a very cool mechanic. It encourages aggressive play for the most part.
Yeah, for the most part. There are exceptions, but it's actually really interesting, though. This is the first time in Standard that we've had landfall without fetch lands overlapping at all. So I think it's going to be a lot more reined in this time around because fetch lands really, really made that mechanic really powerful. And without them,
we have a fetch land, but we don't have.
Yeah, okay. We have Fabled Passage, but I'm talking about the fetch lands. Like both times we've been to Zendikar the first, the last time we were in Zendikar, the set before it was Khans of Tarkir, so we had the allied fetch lands for a good portion of its legality. And then in OG Zendikar, the fetch lands were literally in Zendikar. So we've had fetch lands usually are kind of, at least up until now, are kind of dancing around the landfall cards, which has made the landfall cards very powerful in the past. But I think these ones are going to be a little bit more reined in because they're still going to be good, but I think it's going to be very hard to trigger 2 land drops in a single turn, or a lot harder than it used to be.
You're going to have to work for it in a way that you did not before. And
yeah.
I think that will mean that the games where you get a Fabled Passage and the games where you don't are going to be quite different in terms of what you can do with some of these landfall cards.
Yeah, also to your point, you said, where I totally agree with you, where a lot of the landfall cards are aggressive cards, and Fabled Passage is not it's not at its best in aggressive decks. Because
exactly.
It's an evolving wilds until until you get 4 lands in play. So, and aggressive decks don't want evolving wilds. They really don't. So I think it's doable. I think landfill cards are pretty good. So someone will definitely see play, but I just think it's going to be a lot weaker than you just got to evaluate them with a different lens this time around. That's how you have to do it.
Totally. And a lot of the aggressive landfall cards, like you said, you're not going to be double triggering it every single time. There's usually going to be a trade-off if you want to double trigger it early because the card you're using is either Evolving Wilds or Fabled Passage, which means that you're missing your lands coming in tapped. So you're really saying, okay, I want this double trigger instead of playing on curve, that's an actual choice if you're a landfall deck. And so you're kind of probably going to need specialized cards to kind of enable you to hit landfall multiple times. You might need cards that allow you to make multiple land drops in a turn, things that put lands into play, which looks very different from how landfall decks used to look, which was just play a 1-drop, play a 2-drop, trigger landfall twice or 3 times in a turn, kill them.
Yeah.
So we'll see, but it's a returning mechanic, it's a good mechanic, it's probably the most distinctive Zendikar mechanic, so it's good to see. The next mechanic we see is Party. So this is the tribal mechanic of the set, kind of. And the idea here is that if you assemble kind of a Final Fantasy or a D&D-esque party, you get sweet rewards for having a creature of type cleric or rogue and warrior and wizard. So you want to have at least one creature of each type to have a full party. But one creature cannot count for multiple parts of the party. So if you have a changeling, you don't just have party by itself. You need to have one wizard, one warrior, one rogue, one cleric, at least 4 creatures to have a full party. But most party cards care about the number of members of your party. They do not require you to have all 4. So
yeah.
those are I think that for party, you're going to be getting 1 is easy. Getting 2 is fairly easy. Getting 3 or 4 is hard. So the cards that really require you to have 4 to do what you want them to do are pretty bad. The cards that ask you to have 1 or 2 in play are good. And then they top out even better if you can get there.
Yeah, I am like 95% convinced that any card that says if you control a full party or anything along those lines, that is anything after that is just flavor text. In constructed, like there's just no way you're going to assemble 4 different creatures of different types. Like 1 or 2, you can do it. Like the cards that like discount or like are better with like a couple of them, that could work. But 4 different creatures without any of them getting killed, and like how are you not winning it? Yeah, I am like the best party cards are the ones that don't need you to go all in on the party, or just good standalone cards, which there are a couple of. So yeah, maybe EDH. Like literally, because like the card that it kind of reminds me of is there's like it's like Liliana's Contract. It was like a 5 mana draw 4 lose 4 enchantment that like if you controlled 4 different demons, you just won the game. And like you never got 4 demons. You never got 4 like ever. Like it was an against the odds thing, and even then it was really hard to do. So, and this is obviously not as hard as 4 demons because like demons are kind of rare and there's more of these guys running around. But 4 creatures of different types, I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think that you're almost certainly going to get to party because you're just playing a bunch of rares and mythics and, uncommons that are strong by themselves, because most of these cards in the set, there's a lot of these 4 creature types. You're going to get to the 4 that you want by accident sometimes, just because they have intentionally pushed a bunch of cards that have these types. So you can very easily get there playing a bunch of cards you were going to play anyway, and then when you do that, cards like Archpriest of Iona, which I think is one of the standout party cards, is 1 white for a star 2, where its power is equal to the number of creatures in your party, and then it has a second line of text at the beginning of combat on your turn. If you have a full party, target creature gets +1/+1 and gains flying until end of turn, and it's a human cleric. So it's always a 1 mana 1/2. You can very easily get it to 2/2 if you just curve out, like play anything after it that's a warrior, rogue, or wizard, which there are plenty, and then you've got a 2/2 for 2, which is excellent. 2/2 for 1, which is excellent. If you can just follow that up on turn 3 with something of a different type, you get a 3/2 for 2. We're just talking a fairly normal curve here. There's not that much work that you need to do to get to that. Now, your opponent's going to interact with you. You're going to be losing stuff. But I think that the enabling, at least from a deck building perspective, you're sacrificing almost nothing. Most of the cards, most of the good party members are just the good value cards in each color. They made sure that there's at least 1 or 2 just standout cards in each color that fill the party somehow.
Yeah, I think this is still going to be more of a limit. Like I think the example you brought, Archpriest, yeah, that one's like good. That's like one of those examples where that's a card where you don't need like the full 4 to make that
totally.
card work.
All I'm saying is that like you don't need the full 4 to make it work, but I think getting 4 is actually. There's some mechanics where you really need to make a big concession in deck building to get there. And then there's some mechanics where you need to, maneuver the game to get to where you want it to be. I think this is a mechanic where it's more about maneuvering the game where you can enable party. Enabling it from a deck building perspective is actually fairly trivial. You can just play a bunch of good cards, and then if your opponent doesn't deal with your nonsense, they just lose.
Yeah. Or the way I see it, you could play a bunch of bad cards in Winota. That's worked in the past, so I could definitely see it working again.
Exactly. Yeah. So if Winota can get there with just 30 bad cards and 4 Winotas, and if your opponent doesn't answer Winota, they lose. I think that a deck that's just playing a bunch of good cards, that if your opponent doesn't answer your stuff, they lose. It can work. I'm not going to be the person who plays the party deck, but I think there's more legs to it than it reads at first blush, just because of how pushed some of the cards with the relevant creature types are.
Yeah, Yeah, no, I could definitely see it. Like, again, I'm totally with you there. I'm not going to be the one to brew it. Like, I think I have a good idea what I'm going to start with until Wizards does something about it, but I'm sure we'll get to that.
Yes. So we've got Party, we've got Landfall. Is there another? Oh, we've got Equipment. Equipments in this set are quite different than in previous sets. So equipments are pretty standard at this point in Magic. They're artifacts that you can equip to a creature to give them stat buffs and abilities. But in this set, I feel like it's worth calling out, every equipment equips to a creature when they enter play. You always get a free equip with every single equipment.
Yeah, it's like well, not a bad, it's like a weird aura more like than an actual equipment because the equip costs are so overpriced that it's like, but you get the first hit's free. So it's kind of like a weird aura more than an actual equipment. They're also colored too, which is a difference.
It's like a great aura, honestly. It's the best possible version of an aura instead of drawing a card when it comes into play. Because you can't get 2 for 1. You can never get 2 for 1 with it.
Yep. You just get the worst case scenario. You just get set super behind on tempo, which isn't great, but you are not down cards. So
yep. Another mechanic, another returning mechanic, Kicker. In some ways, the mechanic, almost every other mechanic is just a form of Kicker. But the idea of Kicker is when you cast a spell, you can pay an additional Kicker cost to give some additional effect to the card. So like for an example, there's Bubble Snare, which is 1 blue for an enchantment aura. You can pay Kicker of 2 and a blue. It's an enchant creature. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, it taps the creature it's enchanting, and then its regular effect is enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So if you just cast it for 1, it's basically something that will tap down an already tapped creature. If you cast it for 4, then it's basically Capture Sphere. It's going to tap the thing and then also not let it untap.
Yep. Kickers, it's a good mechanic to have back, especially in a set like Zendikar where we have like, it gels really well with all the other mechanics that we're doing here. Like Landfall, you won't be playing out your land, so kicking spells will be easier. And I guess, and also the other mechanic that we didn't talk about yet, it plays well with that too, because if you want more mana, you're gonna have more mana. So we'll get to that though.
Yeah, and it's really good with ramp, and it's like Kicker cards are also just really good from a design perspective because they always have an effect early and then they stay relevant late because the Kicker will usually give it some sort of extra juice later in the game.
Yeah, it looks like this time around they tried to push some sort of like Kickers, like tribal Kicker, if you will, where like cards like that check other cards being kicked. I don't think it's going to be good enough, but it'll probably be a limited thing at the very least, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's kind of the blue-green limited mechanic.
Yeah.
There's also a +1/+1 counters matters theme going on. So we've got, thank goodness, again, +1/+1 counters matter. And the final mechanic is modal double-faced cards. Kyle, can you explain what a modal double-faced card is?
Yeah, sure. So the modal double, besides for the exception of the rare dual land cycles, modal double face cards are basically spells that you can also play as lands. So the front, they're double face cards, and the front side of the card is a spell that is used you can play it as the spell as written there, just like any other Magic card. But also, when it's in your hand, you can also play it as the backside, which is a land. Usually it is a land that enters the battlefield tapped and taps for 1 color, but there is a mythic cycle that allows you to pay 3 life to have it enter untapped, but it also still does tap for 1 color. So it's very modal and definitely the most powerful mechanic in this set, probably by a significant margin. So this is the one we're looking at, where I'm sure we'll get to more later as well.
Yes. So when you see a modal double-faced card, there's a couple of rules quirks here that we need to talk through. So a modal double-faced card, the front side, which is always, unless it's a land, there is a cycle of modal double-faced lands where the front side is 1 color of land and the back side is another. So those are fairly straightforward. They're lands in both cases. But the ones that are spells on one side and lands on the other, they are always spells on the front, lands on the back.
Yes.
For the purposes of determining what card type this is, if this is in the graveyard, if it's in your library, if you have a card that says search for a land, you cannot search for these. When they are not in your hand, being played, you can only interact with the front half of the card. So you can't tutor up one of these cards using something like Sylvan Scrying to go look for a land. If you have a card that lets you put a land from your hand into play, but not play it, like Uro, for example, you can't play these cards using Uro, using something like that. You can play them from your hand, as your land drop. Same thing is true if it's in your graveyard. If one of these cards is in your graveyard, that doesn't mean you have an instant and a land, or a sorcery and a land. You only have the front half for the purposes of cards that count.
Yeah, there's literally a mythic in this set that lets you play lands from graveyards, but you cannot play the spell lands from your graveyard with that card.
You can play them, but you can only play them as your land drop.
Wait, Wait, hold on. Is that how that? Oh, wow. It's because you can play it. See, this is good why we go through these things, because you're very right, but that is not intuitive.
For example, like if you are tutoring up if you're using like Mystic Tutor and you're looking for an instant or a sorcery, you can get these cards. If you play Primeval Titan, you cannot get these cards and put them into play, which leads to weird things, and I think we should talk about them now, because these cards are really tricky when it comes to how you construct your deck, because they are functionally both lands and spells. They are going to change the way mana works for the entirety of Zendikar Rising. For standard purposes, I have a feeling that they're going to change the way that you construct mana bases forever in all formats, because every single one of these cards is, even if the card doesn't read as incredibly powerful on its surface, remember that the cost of playing this card is at a minimum replacing a land with a tapped land in some cases, and for the mythics, it's not even that. It's replacing a land with a land that deals you 3 damage if you want it untapped, if you care enough to make it untapped. So every single one of these cards has a much, much, much lower barrier to entry, and it, I think, changes the way that you want to build decks in a pretty fundamental way. So I've, in my head, categorized these cards into kind of 2 buckets. The cards that are good enough on their merits that I would want to play them in my deck as a spell, and the cards that, if I am okay with replacing a land, I would like to replace them with this specific spell. So, for example, a card like Kabira Takedown, which is 1 and a white for an instant. It says Kabira Takedown deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature or planeswalker. If I am an aggressive white deck that's trying to go wide, I might just be in for Kabira Takedown anyway, just to be my removal spell, right? Mm-hmm. Like 2 mana, deal damage. There's no to blocking creature or attacking creature. It's just 2 mana, deal damage equal to the number of creatures I have. I am probably down for playing that anyway. So instead of replacing one of my land drops, I could replace a land with this. I could also just replace the removal spell I was going to play with this. And now my deck has an extra 4 lands in it. That it would normally have. And I have not changed anything else about my deck. I am just taking a removal spell and replacing it with another removal spell that also counts as a land. The other bucket are kind of the cards that I would not play if they were not a land, like something like Ondu Inversion, which is 6 white for a sorcery, destroy all non-land permanents. I am not down for an 8-mana Wrath. However, if I'm playing a deck that's planning to go long, and I think that I will survive to see 8 mana, I will probably be down for replacing a few of my planes with a card that, in the late game, wipes everything off the board.
Yeah, no, this mechanic is obviously really pushed. It was this is definitely by far one of the hardest mechanics I've had to just evaluate and figure out how, because it's very clearly absurd, really powerful, and it kind of messes around with the whole land spell balance that Magic has had forever up until this point. But just tap lands don't come free. They really don't. You don't want to just pack your deck full of tap lands, but at the same time, make it so you can't screw or flood is top shelf level, power level. I think these will definitely absolutely be, I think they'll be in standard, they'll be at their best in 2-color decks where you can just kind of you run the mana is also really bad right now. So being able to, you can definitely get away with just running I think the way you want to do it is you play the dual lands in this site, because these are we haven't really talked about them yet, but they're basically, you can basically play them as on either as one basic land type or another one, but they don't actually have the basic land type. But you play the untapped duels, and then you place a few copies of these like modal spells, and you just have this really nice curve. And the basics make it so your lands enter untapped, which you can't really afford to do in 3-color. And that'll be really nice to kind of help 2-color decks never flood, or flood way less often, or screw way less often. And then it's the next format. Historic, it'll be pretty similar. Thank God Field of the Dead's gone, though, in that format. That would have been the worst. Man, imagine playing Ondu version Field of the Dead. Just the worst. Like, that would be the worst. Like, I couldn't even imagine. And then in Pioneer, I think these cards are going to snap the format in half. But yeah, I was thinking about whether or not I was actually going to talk about this, because no one was talking about this and I didn't. But I think there's enough rumblings now. People are kind of smartening up to it. So it's not like it's like a secret that I only know that other people don't, which at one point it definitely was. But what you can do in Pioneer is you can replace all of your lands with these modal spell cards. And then Ballast Trade Spy and Undercity Informer from Gatecrash, they both read where one is a 4-mana 2/3 where ETBs mills you until you hit a land, and the other one is a 3-mana 2/3 with sack ability to pay 1 sack something to do the same thing. So if you make all your lands into spell lands, you just mill your whole deck.
Yeah, because you have no lands. You have no actual lands in your deck. You have
no real lands in your deck. So you just mill yourself over. And I've done like some tests. There's a way you can just, when you flip over your deck, it is not like, it has an Inverter of Truth vibe to it, but it's, in my opinion, even better because you don't need like a Thought. Like, you could use a Thassa's Oracle to win with, but you don't need a Thassa's Oracle to win with it. It just wins on its own like 80% of the time. And then you also have that Thassa's Oracle value. So I think Pioneers is going to get banned. I made a $50 bet with my friend that this was going to get banned. So
I'm guessing that they would ban the 2 enablers that allow you to one turn. And another thing that's important about the combo that you just described is it's a 1-card combo.
Yeah.
With Inverter of Truth, you actually needed the card that won the game. Otherwise, you decked yourself. Mm-hmm. With this, you're flipping over. It involves a bunch of self-mill payoffs, but it kills your opponent by the time that you untap the next turn. Basically.
Yeah.
So
I had a friend who was testing this deck, and it can fairly consistently kill turn 3 and almost always by turn 4. Like
virtual kills on turn 3 and 4.
Yeah. So I guess I'll go into the way you usually go by the win is you pack 4 copies of Crippling Chill into your deck, and you put 4 copies of Silver Smoke Ghoul and Prized Amalgam. So then when you mill your deck, you nug them for 12, gain 12 life. All your Silver Smoke Ghouls see that wonderful life you just gained. They all come back. Then all the Prized Amalgams see the Silver Smoke Ghouls that came back, and then they all come back, and your board's pretty big.
Yeah, so you've dealt your opponent 12 before you attack. You've gained 12 so that if you were getting aggroed out, you now have a life buffer. You get how much power?
You get, well, it depends how many you draw, but if you've drawn perfectly, you get what's called 24 power.
24 power worth of repeating creatures, and then you put a World Spine Worm in your deck so that you don't you don't die, so you can untap next turn, and then you just attack for 24 across 8 bodies.
And if it's even necessary, you can even sneak 1 copy of Driven to Despair into your deck so they all have Menace and make your opponent discard if that's necessary, which I don't think it is, but you can do that.
And you can put Haunted Dead in your deck so that if you happen to need multiple turns, you just keep discarding World Spine Worm.
Yeah,
and you get to have extra turns if you need it. So, like, this deck, I think, is going to get things banned, and I think that based on this line of thinking, where you're pushing the DFCs as far as they possibly can, there's other messed up things you can do. You can make it so that your deck has 100% spell density. So if you wanted to do Spells Matter stuff, like Thought Scour used to, if you were lucky, hit like 2 spells when you Thought Scour yourself. You can guarantee it so that it always does. So you can make Bedlam Reveler like a 2-mana spell on turn 2 pretty easily, or 3. You can make cards that care about that sort of thing just turn on really quickly, like Magnivore might be good. Who knows? It might be good. Like 4 mana for an XX, where X is the number of sorceries in your deck. If your deck is like 56 sorceries and 4 Magnivores. Like, these are things you can do. I'm not saying that all of them are good, but you can make your whole deck have converted mana cost, which that has never been a thing before. You can have no whiffs if you're doing like Sin Prodder stuff. There's a bunch of weird edge cases that these cards enable, but at the highest level of Magic, it's all about the weird edge cases, right? Like,
You only need one.
hey, Lion's Eye Diamond is a really weird card it's really terrible unless you're doing this really weird specific stuff. And then it turns out all that Legacy is the weird specific stuff.
Yeah, no, it's kind of wild. It's actually, I actually get Lion's Eye. I literally learned this 2 days ago that apparently you don't need to tap Lion's Eye Diamond to sack it. Because my opponent killed me. They tapped it for blue mana with Urza, then they sacked it and flashed back like an aggro with extra mana, and I was like, what in the gods? I don't know. The edge cases are wild, but I will say I don't think this is going to get there in Modern. Like, you look at the mana that people work with in Modern right now, and it's ridiculous. Like, yes, like there's like these, you can try doing something similar to what I just talked about in Pioneer and Modern, and that could be good, maybe, but like, you already in Modern can turn your lands into spells with Mystic Sanctuary and fetch lands, so I'm not 100% convinced doing this is better than that. But maybe in small numbers. Small numbers.
I think that it's going to be very interesting. I don't know that every single deck will do this in Modern. I think that every single deck will at least think about playing a few of these cards. And we haven't even talked about, like, you can use this to hide your spells in your land slots. So in the late game, if you can bounce lands back to your hand, you just get to basically tutor up a spell. So it makes cards that return lands to your hand a lot better, or permanents to your hand much better. Like, if I can play a land early and then in the late game just bounce back a clone.
Yeah.
Bounce back a regrowth. That gets a lot more interesting. But I think that there will be a deck that wants to play these in big numbers, because I think that the Charbelcher interaction is very real.
Yeah, that too. Or if you just stack your deck with these things, Charbelcher's just 7 mana, win the game. But is that even too good for Modern? I don't even think it is.
I don't think it's too good for Modern. I just think that could be a Modern deck. Like, you can just put 4 Charbelchers in a deck that's playing Oops All Spells, and then maybe the rest of your deck is just Storm.
Yeah, it very well could be. I think, I just don't think these are going to... They might see a little play in Modern, but I do think they're like... Well, they're at their worst in Legacy. There's no way these are going to see play in Legacy. The mana is too tight. Like, there's just no shot.
I think that they could see some play. Not... Like, you don't think that you'd sneak in one of these untapped ones if you had a deck that called for it?
Like, here's the thing, right? Like, Legacy... Your mana is so optimized. Like, you cannot, like, I know you said untapped land, but, like, the first thing is you kind of have to almost just discard all the tapped lands, because you cannot run tapped lands in Legacy. The mana's...
What if in exchange for your lands coming in tapped, they all pitch to Force of Will?
Yeah, it's a good meme. I know. Like, for what it's worth, I bet Seagate Restoration will see play in Show and Tell. Like, that's the one exception. Like, I'm sure it will happen, because that seems like kind of a free roll. But... so I think Seagate Restoration has the best shot of seeing play. But with that being said, it's just like your mana needs to be optimized, like where every last drop of mana counts. And also with cards like Ponder and especially Brainstorm, you're not like the need to like have your lands not flood you out is not as necessary. You run like, because these cantrips are so good, and like, you know, these, and like most decks run them, not all of them, that you don't really have to, you run low land counts. And these cards are at their worst when you're running low land counts, because they cost 7 or more in some cases. So I don't think they're going to see, like, I do think CK Restoration will see play in a blue-green Show and Tell, and exactly. But besides that, I don't see it.
What if your Delver always flipped?
It already always does flip. Don't you ever play Legacy, Gino?
What if it even more? Flipped even harder?
I just can't. I cannot see Seagate Restoration in like Shadow Skull Smashing. Like, it's just too inefficient. Like, you need, like, Delver is like so hyper efficient with their mana. They're casting Daze. They're casting Force of Will. They're casting Dreadhorde Arcane. Like Brainstorms up the wazoo. I'm telling you.
I'm not betting against these cards. I'm assuming that we will find places to put them in places we don't expect, because they cheat on the rules. They allow a bunch of your slots that otherwise used to just allow your deck to function to now actually do stuff. And that's just something that we've not had to play around with before. We've never been able to do this. Like, there have been decks that have been cheating on the rules in a number of different ways, like your cycling decks where basically all you're trying to do is just cycle as many times as you can. So the card didn't matter. It was the cycling that mattered. It's a new way to build decks, and it's another angle to think about. And I have a feeling that people will find ways that I haven't thought of yet to make these cards incredibly relevant. And there are a good number of these that are just good cards. Like, I could see playing Sajiri Shelter, which is 1 and a white for an instant. Target creature you control gains protection from a color of your choice until end of turn. On the other side, it's a tapped white generating land. That's a totally reasonable spell. I would play that in a deck that cares about heroic, something that needs a protection spell. Jawari Disruption, which is 1 and a blue, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. So that's just Censor. That's just a good card. We've played that before. Saluni Vision, which is 2 and a blue. For an instant, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal an instant or sorcery card from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. That's just a good tutor effect. Let's see some other ones. All the mythics I think are exceptional. Like, you're just going to play those.
Yeah, especially I think out of all those, I think like from just like a pure power level standpoint for these cards, I think Agadeem's Awakening is really gonna mess some people up because those like red black sacky like little guys decks have kind of been like teetering. Not teetering. They've been like the best deck in the format. I'm not talking about teetering. They've been
yes.
Like in Historic, they're the best deck in the format, but in Standard, they've been teetering on the edge of playability. That's what I meant to say. Yeah. So in Standard, in Historic, they're the best deck undebatably. And in Historic they're that, and in Standard they're like teetering on the edge of playability. I think just jamming 4 Agadeem's Awakening into like a red-black sack deck is just going to be ridiculous. With Luris too, just going to be ridiculously good, like so good.
Those people played Grim Menagerie, and this card is just Grim Menagerie with more with like a dozen upsides in exchange for being 1 mana more expensive when you want to cast exactly Grim Menagerie. I think that a lot of these cards, we're looking at them now, we think that they are – every one of them is better than it reads. Every one of them you need to take a hard look and see, is my deck actually better with the untapped land? Because there are some decks where that is not the case, where you're a mid-range deck or you're a control deck and you're trying to draw the game out anyway. You were already signing up for playing a bunch of tapped lands just to make sure that your deck had a bunch of value jammed into it. I don't see how you make an argument for there being more value than just all of your lands being spells, never drawing a dead card. Now at least the dead card will be because you don't need the effect right now, instead of it being a land that does actual nothing. So I think we're going to see a lot of these cards. I want to just make a motion that every one of these would be towards the top of my evaluations on cards for the set for each of the colors. So I'm going to say like the mythics of each of these colors are probably going to be the most played cards of that color from this set. I don't want to involve them in like, what do we think the best card of this color is? Because I think that Agadeem's Awakening is the best black card. I think Seagate Restoration, as much as I don't like that card, like I don't want to pay 4 blue to draw cards equal to the number of cards in my hand, and then I have no maximum hand size the rest of the game. Actually, no, it's number of cards in my hand plus 1.
Plus 1. So
it always draws at least 1.
Yeah.
I don't want to pay that, but I'm evaluating it against an actual island. Like, I will gladly pay 7 mana to draw in exchange for an island slot.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, we'll just say these are the best cards in the set, and that. So it just kind of takes away from everything else because it almost feels like this is like soft companion, where it's like whenever you build a deck, you have to consider like whether or not these are good enough, just because like the warpingness of them and the power level of them. But I will say I don't think it's as bad as companion, because companion was just completely whack. Like this is mildly whack. I am willing to say this is not as good as the OG companions. Like OG companions were completely unreasonable.
I think that they were totally unreasonable, but I think that the effect that they're going to have on games, these lands, is going to be similar in the sense that companions made every game feel the same because you saw the companion, you knew what the deck wanted to do, the deck always had the companion, and they always did their thing on the turn when they could cast the companion. These lands ask even less of you from a deck building perspective than companions did in most cases.
I I would debate that, but
except the standout ones that are like ask literal nothing of you. But these cards will be in every deck regardless of if there's a theme or not. I think that almost every deck in Standard, for the duration of these cards being there, will play some number of these DFCs. And so you're going to start seeing the play patterns over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think there's two big differences there. It was like, one, you're still putting this card in your deck, right? Like, yeah, I understand, like, and the play patterns won't really be the same because, like, it's a modal double face card, so it's going to play out kind of differently in all the games, like in the games where you draw it early versus when you draw it late. So I don't think it falls as victim to the samey problem, if you will. And then also the other thing with companions versus this is the best companion decks were the ones that didn't really pay any cost for their companions. Like they just kind of did the thing that the companion was already doing. It's like, hey, look, 8th card in hand. And like these cards, I feel like will be similar in that regard. Will be at their best in decks that don't really, like, you don't ask very much for them. Like they're already kind of like for example, like Agadeem's Awakening in the red-black deck, or Turn Timber Symbiosis in like the mono-green Planeswalkery ramp deck. Like that's probably where those are going to be at their best. But I don't think it is crazy though. Like we're comparing this to companions. The companions were way too good. So
yeah, we're comparing this to a mechanic that the mechanic itself got changed because it was too messed up in every format.
Yeah.
So I don't think this has to be companion. I'm just thinking like I'm expecting there to be 4 Amaria's Calls in almost every deck with white in it. And if that's the case, yeah, the first Amaria's Call you draw is going to be a land, and that'll be different. But by the time you get to turn 7, guess what? They're going to have Amaria's Call, and they're going to cast it.
Yeah.
If they draw it, they're going to cast it, and you're going to get hit with it. So I think very similarly, like these are the easiest 4 of includes in decks that can support them possible. And so I think that we're just going to see a lot of them. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't play them. Most of these cards don't require you to play a strategy even. Like Agadeem's Awakening requires you to play creatures in like relatively normal distributions. Shatterskull Smashing is just an okay removal spell. It asks that nothing. Actually, that one asks nothing of you. Turn Timber Symbiosis, you need to have creatures in your deck that you'd want to cast instead of a forest.
It's like don't play middle cost creatures. Because you play low cost creatures, they get bigger. But if you play high cost creatures, they're already big. So like don't play middle cost creatures. Is that the deck building restriction here?
Yeah, Seagate Restoration. You just want to have an extra draw spell? Yeah, I mean, I guess Seagate Restoration, you're comparing it against maybe a cycling land if you expect to have no cards in hand.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like you look at this mechanic, and it's obviously very good. But how good? I feel like I need to get my hands, or my virtual hands on these cards and just start playing with them a little bit. And then I can tell you, like, I think it'll take like a few games, like maybe like a dozen matches. Then I can give you like a much better feel about like how good these cards like actually play out. Because like on one hand, it's like, oh my god, we're never gonna flood, we're never gonna screw. That's insane. But like Mirror's Call does cost 7, and if you like replace a basic planes with the Mirror's Call, then like, and you're up against like an aggro deck or a deck pressuring your life total, you're gonna feel really bad. And same can be said about or if any of these like flip cards. And it's like when you're doing deck building, you kind of have to consider if I'm replacing lands, then like how much am I willing to make my mana base shakier? And if I'm replacing spells, then like I got to make sure the cards, like the double face cards I'm playing, are good enough to justify replacing spells. Because like some of these double face cards are just like you don't want to put them in your deck. They're like bad cards. So not all, like a lot of them aren't, but some of them are. So it's like it's an interesting kind of push pull that I think actually playing with the cards will reveal a lot about.
Yeah, and I think that just a heuristic that I've heard talked about is think about these double face cards. What if they just had cycling 1 instead of being a land? That evaluation is not 1-to-1.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a land that's entering tap, so it kind of cost a mana. It's like you cycled for 1 and drew a land, but you can't whiff. Like it's always a land. There's no realm where you're getting rid of this card and getting another land or getting something. You can definitely have a spell in your hand that's not useful at a given moment, but at least you're not in like I need to roll the dice mode like you do with a cycling 1 card early in the game.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting comparison. It's not perfect. Like I feel like it's most on the nose when you compare a card like Jawari Disruption to Censor, right? Where like
Yes.
literally that's what's going on. So like I don't yeah no it makes these cards I think I still stand by like I just gotta get these cards in my hands. Like with that being said, these are obviously gonna be good. It's just whether they're gonna be like merely good or if they're gonna be like absolutely ridiculous. I don't know. I don't know. So I don't want to like pick a side here because like I feel like I'm going to be super wrong no matter what side I take. So
I'm going to pick a side. I'm saying that these are going to be absolutely ridiculous in Standard at a minimum and Pioneer.
Oh, definitely Pioneer. Like I wasn't counting Pioneer because like that's kind of different. That's like kind of breaking the way the cards work. But like using these cards as intended is more like what I'm not sure about.
But yeah, I think that there's the fair use of these cards where this will see some play. I think there's the unfair use of these cards where they will specialize into specific decks. And I think that they're going to change how we play Magic for their entire run through Standard. So we'll see how it plays out, but I'll get my hands on them tomorrow and then and I'll be able to, for the record, we're recording this before this goes on Arena or MTGO. So we'll see we'll see pretty quickly, I think, how this plays out. So now let's turn our attention to each of the colors and do our normal evaluations. We're going to look at each color. We're going to say, hey, this is the best card in the color. This is the card that we think is the most overrated. Here's the card we think is underrated. And then we'll discuss. So let's start with white, Kyle. And we're excluding the modal DFCs because each of those we think would supersede many of the cards that we've been discussing here. So look at those cards, fill your mana base with them, do what you will. So Kyle, what do you think is the best white card?
Yeah, this one wasn't too hard. Like the white cards, all in all, besides the modal face DFCs, obviously, are kind of like okay at best. So like okay, so the card I'm talking about is Skyclave Apparition here. Like this card is so what the card does is it's 1 and 2 white for a 2/2 Core Spirits. When it ETBs, exile up to one non-land permanent your opponent do not control with CMC 4 or less. And then when it leaves the battlefield, it doesn't actually give your opponent back the thing, but they do get a XX Blue Illusion creature token, where X is the CMC of the card that was exiled under it. So this is kind of like a Banisher Priest on like roids, where the big downside about most Banisher Priest effects was that like if they killed it, then they got their thing back, and it's like, oh, with my 3 mana I played an understated thing. Oh, that kind of sucks. But this card doesn't have that downside because like 9 times out of 10, giving them like an XX where X is the amount of mana they spent on that thing is like way worse than that thing that they originally had. So you're always ending up on the exchange. On top of the fact that it hits non-land permanents, this isn't just like this is better than Banisher Priest, where it's hitting basically anything from a planeswalker, artifact, enchantment, creature, whatever you want. So like in curve out aggro decks, like specifically spirits, I think this card's going to be very good. Or like collected company decks, like yeah, I know it doesn't fly, so like that kind of is like a little bit of tension with spirits, but I still think like Coco decks are going to be all over this card because it's just so good at just taking out the annoying thing that you have to deal with at a reasonable rate while also putting your opponent in a very difficult position where they don't get their thing back. Like, no matter what they do, they are not getting their thing back from this. And I think that makes this card very powerful.
Yeah, I think that you hit it right on the nose. It answers anything you want, and even if it dies, whatever you took from your opponent is downgraded almost certainly. Like, your opponent put the card in their deck, and so I assume they would not have wanted a Gnarled Mass or a Grizzly Bear in exchange for whatever they had before. So you're almost certainly getting up on the exchange. And then that doesn't even go into like, what happens if you blink it?
Yeah, there's some nasty stuff you can do if you like blink it with the trigger on the stack. It is the old wording where a lot of these cards used to be worded where it's like, or not used, or the word I guess it's like used to but not used to. A lot of these cards were worded in a way where it's like, take away a thing until this leaves the battlefield. So like if it gets knocked off by a removal spell in response to the trigger, your opponent gets to keep their thing. But this one's got the old wording where if you respond to the trigger, the thing just goes away forever and they get nothing. It's like that Willy Wonka thing where it's like, you get nothing, you lose. So
I wasn't even talking about the part where you give them nothing. I'm just talking about what if you play Yorion and you just blink it, or you play Charming Prince and you blink it, and yeah, they get a card. I mean, they get an XX, but the XX is going to be a bad card.
Yeah, it's one of those things where at least in those cases too, where probably the XX is outclassed by the points that you're doing stuff like that. Like, but when you drop a Urion, like the Urion will always outclass the illusion because this thing can only hit CMC 4 or less, and Urion's a 4/5. So Urion by default will always outclass the illusion.
And if you're playing something like Brazen Borrower, turning your opponent's permanent into a token that you can just bounce is pretty solid all by itself.
Yeah, that sounds like gas.
I think just this thing. And wait, if you can you target the? Non-token. So you can't target the.
Oh no,
the
you
token.
can't hit the illusion. No, it's
you
not.
Can't just keep getting them. But I think the only thing that bounds this thing is that it's cost 4 or less, and 4 I think is also a magic number. Like there's a lot of degenerate stuff at 4, so it's important that this thing hit 4s. But if you're gonna do degenerate engine stuff against white, maybe like 5 might actually be safer in a weird way.
Yeah, I don't think this card's broken. It's just good. Like, it's just really
good.
solid. It's just solid. Like, it fills a specific niche that white really need more of this. Like, the only other card that's kind of like this that in the past is like Elspeth Conqueror's Death. That card's very different than this. And this card's like, it's a lot leaner and a lot meaner than ECD. While ECD might give you more value, this is a lot, it's just a lot more bang for your buck. So, like kind of in the short term. So I think white needs more good cards. So, hey, look, there's a good card for white.
Yeah, my best white card pick was Felidar Retreat, which is 3 and a white for an enchantment. It has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose one. Either create a 2/2 white cat beast creature token, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. So this thing is strictly better Retreat to Emeria. In multiple directions. So Retreat to Emeria was a card that was in Return to Zendikar, which it was same cost, 3 and a white, and then it also had landfall, but the landfall triggers were make a 1/1 core soldier, or give all your creatures +1/+1 until end of turn. So this is strictly better in both directions. The token is bigger and the counter is permanent, and it gives a keyword until end of turn. And I just think that this card compares really favorably when you look at things like, freaking like Field of the Dead.
Yeah, it is like basically Field of the Dead on an enchantment, right? But...
Field of the Dead on an enchantment that turns on turn 4, and it asks nothing of what your mana base should look like. You don't have to do weird Field of the Dead mana base contortions in exchange for being interactable. But it's a much faster clock. It gives +1/+1 counters to all the stuff you played before. It's not just like the cats. So it lets you swing into your opponent's stuff because you have vigilance and be back on defense still. It's just going to spiral out of control very quickly. And yeah, it doesn't do anything necessarily the turn it comes into play. But how many lands do you have to play before this thing is way, way unreasonable?
Yeah, probably. 3 is where I think is where it's good, like nearly good. I think 4 or 5 is where you really want to be until this card's like way above rates. Like, because you think about like 4 mana for 3 2/2s and like an enchantment to buff them. That's like pretty good, but I think 4 or 5 is where you want to be. Yeah, this is also one of those cards where I think it's very powerful. Undeniably, this card is very powerful. But it was kind of what I was talking with Landfall earlier, where Landfall cards kind of have to be evaluated in like a different context where since it's a little bit harder to hit landfall nowadays without fetch lands, I think, not saying this card's bad, because it's not, but you gotta work for it. You gotta work for it if you want to make this card work, I think. I don't think you can just toss this into like a white deck and just have it work. You gotta put a little, because I remember back in like Zendikar, what was the last one called? Battle for Zendikar? Yeah, Battle for Zendikar. Retreat to Emeria actually saw like a minor amount of play in Constructed. And this is just like Retreat to Emeria on steroids. Like, it's so much better. So, like, if there were fetch lands, I'd say this card would be very good, like super good. And even without them, it's like still fine. But I think you got to work a little bit for it. Like, it's like probably is Bantrant still a thing? I think they'll have a couple copies of this with like Euro. Seems pretty solid. Maybe some like explosive vegetation-y kind of stuff. I don't know. We'll see where it goes, but that's where I think
that there are actually a surprising number of cards that just allow you to make extra land drops, like Dryad at the Elysian Groves. You've got Uro. You've got, Song of Creation, but that wouldn't be in the same deck. But you've got Beanstalk Giant. There are a good number of cards that are going to allow you to get there. It's not like you can just have your mana base give you the extra land drops like you used to, but there are more cards that let you play additional lands every turn, and the white green uncommons and rares give you lands and allow you to make extra land drops and cycle through lands. So I think this card's going to be quite good. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't see as much play as I think it should, because it just ends up not lining up well. Like, there's a lot of removal in this format. There's a surprising amount of removal for enchantments right now, and turn 4, it might be too slow. Like, you might not be able to just accrue value from turn 4 and actually make that be meaningful. Like, I don't think that Field of the Dead would be very good in a standard where you're getting blasted combo killed on like 5 or 6. Right?
Well, in a standard format, this isn't. There's a key difference between this and Field of the Dead, right? Like the fact
you can't interact with.
Yeah, but main Field of the Dead so busted was that you couldn't interact with it, and you could search up with your land searching effects, like Our Promise in Historic and Golos in Standard when that was legal. Like, that's what really broke Field of the Dead, and this ain't that. But honestly, one of the things I think that really holds this card, or what I'm guessing might hold this card back, if it does get held back, is another landfall card that I am planning on talking about later, which I think is very good. Like, very, very, very good. So, actually, it might be my best card in the set, minus the double face cards. So, I'll get to that later, but, we'll just kind of want to hint at it now.
What do we think is an overrated card in white?
Oh, yes. So, I got it, yeah. It's funny, because there's actually, with these colors things, it's not usually too hard, because a lot of stuff's limited fodder. But, yeah, my choice for the overrated card is Journey to Oblivion. I saw people, in the early access event, actually playing this card. This card is so bad. Like, it's really bad. Like, I know it's like, oh, let's enable my party. But, like, you have to get 3 creatures in your party to get this card so where you, are happy, like rewarded for casting it. You get 3 different creatures with 3 different types in order to make this card be, a payoff, if you can call that. And you have to get 2 creatures to make this an Oblivion Ring, which is, a card you can already just play in Standard, no strings attached. Banishing Light. Banishing Light's legal. Play Banishing Light. Don't play this card. This card's really bad. So it's pretty easy for me. The only reason I even brought it up is I thought people knew it was bad, but people were playing it, and I'm like, no, don't play it.
No, you do. People are barely, it's going to be a different standard, so I guess I shouldn't compare it to Conclave Tribunal directly, but people didn't really play Conclave Tribunal all that much.
Conclave Tribunal, this is not.
It was much better than this.
Much.
So my overrated card, I'm going to say Legion Angel.
Interesting.
Which is 2 white for a 4/3 flying Angel Warrior. When Legion Angel enters the battlefield, you may reveal a card you own named Legion Angel from outside the game and put it into your hand. So this is a card that basically, if you draw your first Legion Angel, if you have 1 Legion Angel in your deck and 3 in your sideboard, that means that your first Legion Angel will draw your second, which then you play your second, and then you get your third. So it's basically 1 card that then represents a virtual 4 cards. My problem with this card is that, well, first, you need to decide how many are in your deck and how many are in your sideboard, because the more that you play in your deck, the worse the one you draw will be.
Mm-hmm.
But my problem is just that I don't want a 4/3 flyer for 4 that much in current Standard contexts.
Yeah.
I don't think drawing a second one is that good, because I don't want to play the second one. The first one would be fine. If this was 4 mana, 4/3 draw card, would you be happy with it?
4 mana, 4/3 flying draw card? Yeah, I'd play that.
You'd be happy with it. What if it only draws itself?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Where I feel like, I don't know, in best of 1, where you can just run, I don't know. This card's hard to evaluate, because 2 years ago, this was the shit. This would be the shit 2 years ago, but we're not 2 years ago anymore. So, I don't know. I could see it being bad, but I don't know. 4 mana 4/3 isn't that below rate, and if you can if you get 3 more 4, you just put 1 copy of this in your deck and 3 in your board. I don't know, but is that worth? Yeah, it's probably not amazing, but
you're not going to draw it very often if you do that, and I just don't think that.
That's okay, right? It doesn't mean the card's
How many
bad.
turns are you just going to cast Legion Angels?
I feel like it's an okay top end, of an aggro deck. You just run 1 copy. I feel like the opportunity cost is pretty low in Winota decks or something like that.
I'm never going to draw it.
It's okay. It doesn't have to. You don't have to draw it so much. Doesn't mean it's bad though. It's just one copy. It's like Urborg. Urborg, you only want 1. So, but it's still good.
Yeah, I just think that Legion Angel, I don't want. I mean, the opportunity cost of playing one is very low. Well, I mean, 3 slots in your sideboard.
It's actually not like super low. I feel like two might be the best way to go about it.
In Best of One, this card is a no-brainer. You play 1 or 2 in almost any deck that plays white because Best of One's not a real format.
Yeah, it's not.
So who cares? Do whatever you want. Drawing
mono
extra
red
cards
to your heart's content.
is good there. Yeah, turns out, but it's not a red aggro deck, so you won't even win anyway. But yeah, I just think that in the current context of Magic, I don't love spending that much on a card. Even if it replaces itself, it literally replaces itself with itself, and Magic has not been about casting stat monsters like this in a good long time.
No, it hasn't. I can see. I don't know. I don't want to like write it off as like unplayable, but like
I don't think it's unplayable. I just think that it's overrated. I think that I've heard talk about it as though it's going to be a top end finisher or it'd be a premium card, and I think that this is a card that is great in Best of One, gets much worse in Best of 3, and is going to be outclassed very quickly. And it looks like it's an efficient, well-costed spell. It functionally draws a card, but I think that if there was something that I learned from Akum Houndmaster, that 2-mana 2/2 that draws you 2 cards.
Wait, that card was good though. What?
Is it good? Because it doesn't see much play.
No, it was in Paw Blade with Winota. Like right now, Standard's a mess because Euro piles are just like objectively the best thing to do. But
Winota is very good, but outside of Winota, no one's just playing that card for value.
Oh, of course not.
It's basically it's almost Ancestral Recall. And it turns out if the cards that you draw, even if you're drawing multiple cards, if the cards are bad, it doesn't matter because that's not what this game's about anymore.
Yeah, I would say this is a little different though because there's 2 key distinctions between a card like what's it, the Houndmaster? I don't know what it's called. It's like I know
it's not taking up space in your deck, and this card is just better than those cards.
Well, that I guess would be 3 things. Like, yeah, it's not taking up space in your deck, but it's also like you're never going to like draw. Like, you'll always have 2 angels ready to go, or 3 angels. You'll always have those angels that you put in your sideboard ready to go in your sideboard. Like, even if you draw both copies of Legion Angel, you'll still have the 2 in your sideboard. Like that, you'll always get something off of this unless you've already gotten something. If you know what I'm saying here.
Unless you maxed out already.
Yes, unless you've maxed out. Like you will get you will get all 4 of your Legion Angels or 3 of your 4. You'll get your Legion Angels, all the Legion Angels from your sideboard, like from an in a value exchange in some way, which I think does put it up. And also, yeah, you don't have to put garbage cards in your deck with this card. Well, you have to put garbage cards in your sideboard with this, or it's not like you have to put, yeah.
You do.
So I don't know. Like I feel like Karn taught us that that's not as bad. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. It's a very interesting card. I actually like it a lot, just like as a design.
I like the design. I just don't think it's as good as people think. What do you think is an underrated card in white?
Oh yeah, this is also an easy one. I think Luminarch Aspirant's just so underrated. Like this card's just really good. Like you look at it and you think like, oh, we've seen so many overstated beaters like over the ages. Like what's gonna make this one set? What's gonna set this one apart, Kyle? And what I think set this one apart is it doesn't just buff itself, which well, first of all, it does buff itself, so it's not like it doesn't do that. But on top of that, it also kind of makes your whole team, like, it puts the stats exactly where you need it, and it almost has, like haste points, too, and it just works really well. Like, this is an excellent 2-drop in just, like, a white-based aggressive deck to just really put the pressure on your opponent. And, like, if you go, 2 turns with this thing not being answered, you would put 4 power for 2 mana into play, some of it being hasted, which is really, really good. Like, yeah, it gets stomped and all that stuff, but, like, your opponent basically has to have the stomp right away, because then it'll grow out of range, and it's also just, that doesn't even account for all the +1/+1 counter synergies you can do with it. Although, with that being said, I don't think that's the best way to use this card. I think you want to definitely play this in, like, a white-based aggro deck, but this is a premier white 2-drop in a white-based aggressive deck. Like, top shelf stuff.
It is worst case scenario a grizzly bear that grows +1/+1 every turn, and that's if you're doing nothing else.
Yeah, like when it's always attacking, even if you have nothing else, it's attacking for 3, like immediately, and then 4, and then 5. Like that's a lot of it.
And it's turning off Heartless Act too.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't Heartless Act this thing unless you do it like perfect timing, I guess. Then you can, but. Yeah, doesn't die to Doom Blade all the time. I really like this card. I'm a huge fan of this card. If white aggro is a thing, it also plays well with Winota in the sense that, well, it plays okay with Winota in the sense that it's a good human that you can kind of hit and not feel miserable. Like, it's not the best hit off Winota, but like, kind of, it's like a good human that you can put in your Winota deck, right?
Yeah.
Like, Yeah, so I'm a big fan of this card. I think obviously white aggro needs to be good for this card to be good, but if white aggro is good, 4 copies of this card, no, not a question.
Agreed. So for me, I think my underrated card is going to be Squad Commander, which is 3 and a white for a 3/3 core warrior. When Squad Commander enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white core warrior creature token for each creature in your party. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you have a full party, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible until end of turn. I just think that this card, if you just get the case that we're kind of talking about, where you have one party member plus this card, I think you're getting paid pretty well. 5 power and toughness across 3 bodies. If you ever enable party, you're just swinging full out with no need to worry about what combat's going to look like. You're buffing your entire squad. I think that this is something that in a white aggressive deck, just like a mono white aggressive deck, it's a really good top end of that deck. Like all of a sudden you play this thing and you're getting a wide board. You're making your glorious anthems much better.
That's actually so interesting. I'm like joking here. I think it's really interesting that you don't like Legion Angel, but you do like Squad Commander, because I feel like the cards are fundamentally very similar. Where these top ends in these aggressive decks, and they're kind of good at both doing that. But I don't know.
So the reason why I like Squad Commander over Legion Angel is Legion Angel, you're committing yourself to getting the value if you cast another Legion Angel, right? The first Legion Angel is good. The second one's going to be a little bit better. I think Squad Commander, the turn you untap with Squad Commander should be the turn you kill your opponent.
Yeah.
You're getting all the value up front. If it works out, it does, and you kill your opponent. If it doesn't work out, yeah, you're behind. But I just like getting all of the bodies up front, and I'm expecting this in like a go wide aggro deck. Whereas Legion Angel, I would expect more in like a mid-range deck, or maybe at the top end of an aggro deck. But I don't know how many aggro decks want to play a 4/3 flyer as their top end.
Yeah.
So that's all. I just think that there's the support for a go wide aggro deck with Glorious Anthem, and I don't necessarily know what the home is for a 4/3 flyer that draws a card.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I see it. It's also nice too. This card is a warrior, so it kind of already helps with the party enabling. So you only really need one card, other type to really make this kind of work, if you will.
It's always a 4/4 with across 2 bodies.
Yep, which is not great, but it also isn't the worst. So the floor is pretty low, which I like. So yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, it's a real go wide aggro deck. Just play your Glorious Anthems, get them dead.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to blue, what do we think is the best card in blue that's not a modal DFC?
Yeah, this one actually wasn't too hard for me either. So in my opinion, I think Jace Mirror Mage is the best blue card that is not a modal double face card, because those are really good. But yeah, let me break that. I can break down why I think that though. So on a surface, Jace is a solid 3-mana walker that's going to put you up on cards and make sure you're drawing what you need when you need it. And the deck building restriction for it isn't it's not nothing. It's not nothing, but it's not that big. You just gotta not play really expensive spells. You can even get away with playing some 4-drop spells, just as long as you're not playing ridiculous ultimatums and stuff like that. He doesn't play. Even if you are, it's honestly not the worst, because you can kind of manipulate your deck with the Scry 2 to make sure that you never or that you don't often hit something that'll kill off your Jace. But just as it is, this card the front end, or I'll call it the front end because it's we'll get to it. But is a 3-mana walker that's very similar to Jace Valerian, which is, I think it's just nice, and it's very solid. It runs away with the game if your opponent doesn't interact or remove it or do something to it, which is about all I'm looking for in my 3-mana walkers. So the bar for 3-mana walkers, we've had some pretty ridiculous ones. Teferi Time Raveler, I do not think this is, but it's still as a 3-mana walker, its abilities are fairly solid. It puts you pretty far ahead if left uncontested, which is what I'm looking for.
And it has high loyalty.
Yes, it does. And also plussing 1 Scry 2, putting it to 5. That's totally reasonable and good. And then you get to the kicker, where you can pay 2 more mana to make a copy of this guy, except the copy is not legendary and it starts at 1. So this kind of acts as a 3-mana walker, which a 3-mana walker and a 5-mana walker, because when you have 2 of these in play, you're basically getting the value that a 5-mana walker would provide. So on 3 mana, Jace is a solid 3-mana walker, and Jace is also a solid 5-mana walker. Because like when you have both of them, you can use like the legendary copy to like scry, and then you use like the regular one to draw. So you're like basically scrying 2 and drawing a card every single turn, and like making sure it's perfect. So your Jace
Or
is doing
scry 4, which is pretty good.
Yeah, or scry 4, Like so, like the fact that this card is solid at its 3-mana rate and solid at its and solid when you cast it for 3 and solid when you cast it for 5 makes me think this is really solid, like ridiculous. It's like a charm with like both modes being good, and those of 9 times out of 10 when you have a charm that both modes are solid, it sees play and constructed. So I think this card is very solid and just like you don't put it. It's not like the Fairy Time Raveler where you just threw it in every blue-white deck. Like it's not that good. That card was kind of stupid, but this card, I think it's quite good and it just plays very well. Just like the play patterns are very good.
And I like the tension with it in the modal DFCs because the safe haven for the 0 ability is a land, and if you're going to play the modal DFCs in high numbers, all of a sudden Jace gets worse.
This is true. If you 0 Jace and hit a Seagate Restoration, you're going to feel pretty dumb.
Yeah, so I like that there's a tension there. You don't just get to free roll it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, this card is far from a free roll. You kind of have to build, because it doesn't protect itself, right? Like, it has high loyalty, but it does nothing to actually, like, keep itself alive. Like, again, I'm going to bring up the Fairy Time Raveler again, because that's the 3-mana walker I always look at. Like, that one protected itself by bouncing the creature and drawing the card and being passively annoying. Like, this card doesn't do that. So you gotta, you can't just throw it in anything. But in the decks where it's good, I think this card's going to be very good.
Agreed. So for me, I think that the best blue card that's not a DFC, I'm going to just go with Seagate Stormcaller. So it's 1 in a blue for a 2/1 human wizard. When it enters the battle with kicker, 4 in a blue. When Seagate Stormcaller enters the battlefield, copy the next instant or sorcery spell with converted mana cost 2 or less. You cast this turn when you cast it. The Seagate Stormcaller was kicked. Copy that spell twice instead. You may choose new targets for the copies. So I think that upfront, cost 2 or less spell, it reads like, oh, okay, I'm just going to get a copy of Opt or Shock or, what is the new red lava?
Oh, yeah, I know. I can pull up the name. I know what you're talking about. It's like the deal 1.
Not Lava Axe.
It's not
the deal 3.
The deal 3. Oh, like the lightning strike. Royal Eruption is what you were.
Yeah, the volcanic hammer. So doubling up on one of those spells for 4 is usually good. Like you're going to get value there. But an important thing to remember is that kicker does not count as the converted mana cost. So if you kick a spell and if you play this and then cast a spell with kicker, you're going to get the full kicker effect twice.
Yep.
So if you have 6 mana, you cast this and then you cast Into the Royal Kicked, you're going to, for 6 mana, get a 2/1, bounce 2 permanents, draw 2 cards. That's just like on the front. I think that's pretty solid. It's also very solid as just like a nice value card, and it is itself with its kicker able to turn and opt into an Ancestral Recall. So I think that it's just a really low opportunity cost sort of spell in a Spells Matters blue-red deck. So you're just going to throw this into decks with cards like Rail the Everwise, cards that we're already playing. What's the 3/3 Stormwing Entity? Like in those sorts of decks, I think this card's going to be very good. Now, I don't think that this card's going to be ubiquitous. I don't think it's going to be everywhere, but I think that the context in which you're going to want this is pretty regular, pretty normal. You can also want it in blue-black, and you can play it alongside the removal spell that I'm sure we're going to talk about when we talk about black. So I think that this card's going to see a good amount of play, and I think it's a good contender. It also has Wizard as a type, if that's relevant.
Yeah, no, I think the card also has kicker, if that's relevant. I don't think kicker is like mostly flavor text, but you were talking about copy and kick spells, and this card also has kicker, so if you threw it into I said I don't think kicker's going to be good enough, but if it was, this card is debatable, so, but yeah, no, I like this card. It's going to be very good in the blue-red spells decks, running a bunch of one-drop spells, because if you can just go like this card into like a shock and knock out 2 guys, that's going to feel a lot like Snap Bolt, which is pretty good. But
and I think that with Blood Chief's Thirst specifically in black-blue, this thing's going to be nasty, especially if you kick it. So yeah, we'll get to that. But I think that this card just low opportunity cost, high upside. or at least like medium upside. It's always going to give you a pretty good value as long as you're building your deck appropriately.
Yeah, it's a lot worse than Snapcaster Mage, though.
Yeah, people shouldn't be comparing this card to Snapcaster. It's a different card. It's a very different card than Snapcaster.
I know. Yeah. You don't have to be Snapcaster good to see play in Standard. I'm totally with you. So, yep, with you on that.
What do we think the most overrated or your overrated card?
Yeah. So like the difficulty I was having here is like trying to find cards that like people were actually talking about that are like overrated in blue.
Confounding Conundrum.
Confounding Conundrum. Wait, that was the one that we talked. I don't know how I feel about that. That's definitely not like my pick because I think this card's actually okay. Like,
okay, then you make your pick. I'm gonna say Confounding Conundrum if you need time to think.
Fair enough. Yeah, this one was a toughie because at least to me, I didn't like I can see Confounding Conundrum, but like that's definitely not like I would not agree. That's super. Oh, well, you go first because we're gonna have some good conversation here.
It's 1 and a blue. It's an enchantment. When Confounding Conundrum enters the battlefield, draw a card. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player had another land enter the battlefield under their control this turn, they return a land they control to its owner's hand. So this card is basically your anti-ramp card. It's going to make it so that those decks that want to go crazy with landfall are going to at least not be ramping. They can get multiple landfall triggers, but they are not going to be accelerating on mana, which to me, that's not the problem. Like, that's not, I don't know what cards, you're not going to get to like ramp to Ugin on turn 8, on turn 4 or something, but most of the stuff I'm interested in is just making my land drops for landfall triggers, even with the decks that are playing with stuff that's going to enable you to play multiple spells or multiple lands a turn. I'm not actually that interested in accelerating on mana. Like, that's a nice, fun bonus, but this card makes it so that I'm guaranteed to get as many landfall triggers as I want on a turn, because after my first land, if I can make a second land drop, it's going to bounce back a land, which will let me just replay that land. So I just think that the cards that this seems like it's designed to hate out, like Uro, right? Who cares if you don't get the land drop with Uro? I'm happy to play Uro even if I never get the land drop, because a 6/6 that comes back from the graveyard is just disgusting. I think that for most of like decks that want Lotus Cobra or want Omnath, which I'm sure we'll talk about, both of those cards, they just kind of want to make their land drops. They don't actually necessarily care that much about accelerating via lands.
Yeah, like, so it's what I agree with, like, stuff like Landfall. I don't think, like, if this card might have been designed as the anti-Landfall card, but clearly that's not what it's supposed to do. But, like, as a card, what I really like about it is it stops ramp, like, people who are trying to get from, basically people trying to cast cards like Rampant Growth, right? Or like whatever card that might be. I guess Growth Spire would be a bag, and it doesn't stop that one. And it does it because like one of the big things Control has always had a tough time with, especially in like Modern and Pioneer, is like these decks that these big mana decks that just throw a bunch of mana onto the table and then like kill you. It's really difficult. And this card like kind of cleans that up at a very low opportunity cost. So you're right. Like against like landfall decks and against Uro, it's clearly not that insane it. Or also like in older formats like Modern, and I'll get to Legacy because I got kind of burned at the stake here for saying this card could be good in Legacy, but like it slows down fetch lands, which is like it also doesn't stop them, and it's also one side, so you can still do whatever the hell you want with your mana. So it can be used as like a nice disruption piece as well, where I don't know. I think this card it's very uniquely powerful, and I think there will be places where this card sees play where people are trying to get, because like blue decks a lot of the time have trouble with big mana decks. Like not always, but often. And this card is a card that stops big mana decks. So I think this card will fit that niche very well. And also in Legacy, I was like, oh look, this card goes off with Whirlcore Dragon, slows down fetch lands. Isn't this good, right? And everyone's like, no, it's bad. It's too slow. It helps their Mystic Sanctuary. And I'm like, all right, fine, it's probably bad. But like, it might not be.
I think that if you're going to put this in a Yorion deck, if you're going to put this in a spot where you're blinking it, I think the barrier to entry is a lot lower. Like those decks played friggin' like eggs that just ETB drew a card and almost did nothing else. So in those cases, the barrier is really low to play this card. But I think that if you're just going to put this card into a deck thinking, okay, this is my answer to Uro, I'm going to sideboard this card in, then you're in for a world of hurt. Like, you just need to make decisions based around what you're actually trying to solve. This is definitely a sideboard card that is worthy of some cases, but you have to know that what you actually want to stop is land-based ramp, not the cards that come along with it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. It's like you're not going to, but yeah, it is like two peas in a pod with Yorion though. Like Yorion's going to love this shit because like you don't really ramp too much, but not always with Yorion. Being able to stop ramp is really good in like a lot of blue-white control decks. So, and also, even though you're not stopping Euro with this, if you're just kind of running this in your main deck and with like, for the intention of blinking it for value with Yorion and also slowing down Euro a little bit, it could be good. It can be good. Like, it makes Euro on the front end, like, kind of bad. Like, you're basically paying 3 mana to cycle it and gain 3 life at that point. So, that's not that. It is fine. No, it's fine. I'm not saying it's still fine. You're not stopping Euro. You're definitely not. But you're just kind of like.
WotC's going to stop Euro when they ban him.
Yeah, of course. But you're not. My point is to this card. Yeah, you're not stopping Euro with this card, but you're slowing it down a little bit. Like, you can't, do not bring this in to stop Euro. But against ramp decks that run Euro just randomly, sure. Like, why not? Like, it can help. I think this card. I don't know. I'm convinced this card is going to see play somewhere. Like, I don't know. I don't know exactly what deck. Like, it'll be a control deck trying to stop a big mana deck.
Yep, that is the exact situation I see this working in, but I don't want to see it in as many spots. I bet I'm going to see it in a lot of sideboards, and it's just not going to make sense. I was going to be like, you're a rogue deck. Why are you playing this? Well, you have to deal with ramp. Well, no, you're a rogue deck. You kill them. How do you deal with it? You kill them. Okay. What is your overrated blue card?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I looked through all the blue cards here. I think people have been pretty spot on about most of these. I don't think I have an overrated blue card here. Like, I don't think anyone's really said anything that's like too good or like unless you're like unless you like I feel like Solemnity Vision like maybe, but even that's like it's a spell land, so I don't even want to go there. So yeah, I'm just not gonna. I think I'm just gonna go to the pass here. I think people have been pretty good at nailing these as either good or bad. Or at least nothing overrated in this sense. Underrated, I do have one, but definitely not overrated.
Yeah. So yeah, that all made sense. So moving on to underrated blue cards.
Yes.
Did you have an underrated or
yes,
is it similar?
I do. Actually, I do have an underrated blue card here. I think Master of the Winds is super underrated. I think this card's very good because like it's
that was my pick. Damn you.
Well, it's okay. We can take it on together. There's not too many blue cards. Well, there's a couple of blue cards that are kind of, actually never mind. I don't think Thieving Skydivers is very underrated, but. Yeah, this card, it's 2 mana or 4 mana 1/4, ETB, draw 2, discard a card, and when you either cast an instant, sorcery, or wizard spell, you can flip it to a 4/1 or back to a 1/4. So in like blue-red Drowsy decks, this card's like kind of like Crackling Drake. This card feels a lot like Crackling Drake, where it's like it wants you to play like these instant sorceries kind of stuff, and it like draws you a card, but this is like even better. Like drawing 2 and discarding is even better than drawing a card, and also doesn't require blue, blue, red, red. So I think this card is going to be a really nice top end in these Spells Matters decks. And it's very good at blocking and very good at attacking at the same time. Or not at the same time, but it can do either. Or it's decent at both, I should say. Maybe not very good at either, but it's fairly good at both. So I like it a lot.
It's a good turn the corner sort of card. And I think just getting a what is the 2 mana discard one that for 3?
2 mana discard 1.
Draw 2, discard 1.
Catalog or whatever?
Catalog, yeah. Catalog is a card that sees play semi-regularly in Standard, and this for 1 mana extra gives you a body that's a legit body that you can toggle between these 2 modes.
Yeah,
I think that the barrier on Catalog with a body is just really small. Like, I would totally play this card. Catalog is a completely reasonable card for 3 mana. And this is just for 4 mana, giving you a very valuable, I think a pretty valuable creature. Not a very valuable.
Yeah.
It's a 5-turn clock by itself if you just are able to cast more spells.
Yeah, it also super doesn't die to Doomblade. Like, if this card gets killed and you're just like at the Rummage, or no, sorry, Catalog, that's great. That's such good value. So exactly. I am a huge fan of this card.
Look at this card and then look at Legion Angel and say, which one do you like more? I think I like the one that catalogs more than the one that draws me 4/3 flyers.
Yeah, but whites always get the bad cards, right? So, yeah, it'd be like that. Blue always gets the good ones.
Now we move on to black. What do we think is the best black card that is not Aghanim's Awakening?
Yeah, that's not Aghanim's Awakening. Yeah, it kind of narrows it. Or, we can't say Hagar Mauling either. Damn. All right. Fine, fair enough. Yeah, man, it's kind of crazy because the black double face cards are like the best double face cards, but I still think if we're gonna like, there's actually there's a couple black cards here that are I think both very good, but they're also kind of well, they're not similar, but they're fun, they're mechanically similar, sort of. So I'm just gonna kind of like throw them both in there because it's like you'll get it when I say so. Blood Chief's Thirst and Feed the Swarm. So they're both removal spells is the idea. So like that's kind of why I'm lumping them together. Obviously, they're removal spells that do very different things. But in the case of Blood Chief's Thirst, this is like one of the most modal removal spells we've seen in Standard in like a very long time. Like it's almost Fatal Push on the front end and like a Hero's Downfall, or maybe like I guess it would be
read the card.
Yeah, Blood Chief's Thirst. What are you talking about? Read the card. Like, not Hero's Downfall, but.
No. I mean, we haven't read the card. It's.
Oh, that's what you mean. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's Blood Chief's Thirst. It's a black.
Sorry. Yes.
Kicker 2 and a black. Destroy target creature or planeswalker with converted mana cost 2 or less. If the spell was kicked, instead destroy target creature or planeswalker.
Yep. My apologies. That's what you meant. I misunderstood what you meant there, but yeah, that's good to do. So yeah, so on the front end, it's like Sorcery Fatal Push, and on the back end, it's like 4 mana. What's that card from Never? Yeah, Never from Amonkhet. And both those cards are pretty bad, but being able to have both is super powerful because this card is gonna never be bad. Like in the early game, it kills everything, and the late game it kills everything. So this is just like the big old sorcery doom blade that just kills it all, kills all the creatures, all the walkers. Does it at the point you need to do it. So you don't want to pack your deck full of these. Like I don't think you want like 4 copies of this like you would like a card like Heartless Act. But this is a great card to round out your removal spells and say like I think most black decks are gonna want some number of copies of this card.
Really?
Yeah.
I think this card is no. I mean, with the comparison of Heartless Act specifically, I think that you're going to want 4 of these, and you're not going to want 4 copies of Heartless Act anymore.
Yeah, actually, that's fair. I could see it. But
I think that removing a creature of cost 2 or less is just such a valuable mode in the early game, and the ability to kill anything, even things with counters, considering we're going into a standard where I think +1/+1 counters are going to be pretty plentiful. I think that Blood Chief's Thirst is going to end up being more versatile than Heartless Act in a lot of cases.
Yep, I can all see it. Also, it kills Ryan 6 in Modern. Ain't that cool, right?
It is very cool.
Yeah.
It also kills Tybalt.
It does. Oh, poor Tybalt, man. He didn't deserve that. Ryan 6 deserved it. Tybalt didn't deserve it.
Feed the Swarm, you were saying?
Yes, Feed the Swarm. So this card, let me read this one out for you. So 1 and a black note. Destroy target creature or enchantment your opponent controls. And then you lose life, you lose permanent CMC. So the fact this is just a 2 mana enchantment removal spell in black, like, yeah, it's not efficient. You're taking a bunch of damage to do it. Like, either kill the creature or kill the enchantment. But we can do it. We can kill enchantments in black now. We did it. Like, this is huge. This is like, there's no, like, yes, you're taking damage for it, but there's no questions asked. There's an enchantment on the other side of the opponent's table, and you're playing black, you can kill it now. That's like, black has never really been able to do that.
It's literally never been able to do it.
Yeah, like there's like Farika's Libation, but that card's way worse. Like this card's so much better than that card. Like it's actually kind of funny because in Legacy, there's been rumblings about people considering cutting the Force of Vigors in their sideboard for Feed the Swarm to deal with Leyline of the Void in their Hogak deck, and I'm over here playing my World Gorger deck, being like, yes, do it. Because
do it, you cowards.
Do it. Take out that 0 mana card that blows me out that I can't do barely anything about, and add this 2 mana card that does literally nothing against me. Do it. So yeah, that's more of a joke though. But yeah, this card's very, very flexible. Like the fact that it kills an enchantment in black, like that's enough at a good rate. Like that's all, enough said. So
yeah, it's a game changer. It's literally giving black an access to part of the color pie it never had before. So it's changing the way that these decks are going to play.
Yeah, I know Wizards have been hinting at this for a while. Like they're saying they want to give black enchantment removal for a while, so this isn't too surprising, but it finally happened.
And it's a good card too. It's not like 5 mana destroy an enchantment or a creature. It's going to see play in potentially multiple formats.
Yeah.
So for me, I think the best black card is Null Priest of Oblivion, which is 1 and a black. Well, I other than those removal spells you just said.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think that the 1 mana black removal spell is probably the best black card. But Null Priest of Oblivion is 1 in a black for a Vampire Cleric. It's a 2/1 with Menace and Lifelink, and it has Kicker, 3 in a black. When Null Priest of Oblivion enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is basically a 2 mana, 2/1 Menace Lifelink, which is that's a solid body all by itself. And in the late game, for 6 mana, you can also zombify anything.
Yep.
From your graveyard. So it's just a solid 2-for-1 in the late game. It's similar to Stormcaller, right? It's something that's just going to be a solid 2-for-1. It's got relevant creature types. It's going to see play. It's got evasion. It's got lifelink. So racing it's a pain in the butt. And it plays nice with the cleric deck if you're going to be running the clerics, because there's good cleric synergy.
Yeah. The cards saw. It's like one of those cards. I remember when I was reading this card. I'm just like, is this what Magic's like? It's funny you said about Legion Angel, but I'm like, I feel like this is also kind of like an older card, or it feels like an older card. It's like, is this what Magic's about nowadays? I wasn't sure. Like, I could see it.
I think the part that makes this card above average is that the zombify. So you can definitely get to some shenanigans seeding your graveyard, and then just zombify something huge.
Yeah.
Like we still have just gigantic cyclers. People aren't necessarily playing them as much, but they exist. You can mill yourself. Your opponents can mill you. There are decks that are going to reward milling. So if you're going to be getting up to those sorts of shenanigans, it's not like the 2 mana 2/1 Menace Lifelink body's bad, and then you're playing that to get this upside. So I think that you're just going to be able to free roll this kicker upside, and it's one of those cards that I looked at and went, okay, so I guess they're not going to make us work that hard to get a full party, because this fills one of the roles and is just a solid B+ in both modes, and so I think it's just going to see a good amount of play.
Yeah.
What card do we think is overrated in black?
Oh, I got this one. Oh, it's definitely Shadow's Verdict. Oh my god. When I saw people... so the card it's 5 mana. Exile all creatures and planeswalkers with CMC 3 or less from the battlefield, and all creatures and planeswalkers with CMC 3 or less from all graveyards. When I first saw this card spoiled, someone on Twitter said, "Oh, we finally have an answer to the Euro," and I actually just laughed. I just laughed I was like, no. Like, this ain't it, Chief. This is absolutely not it. This card could be good. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's basically you're paying 1 more for rituals to exile stuff from graveyards and also hit planeswalkers. And Rituals was okay in standard. It was never great. So you're taking a card that's okay and you're making it debatably worse. I think it is worse. 4 to 5 on your Wrath's a pretty big deal. And also this is so you gotta be playing this in specifically a deck with 4 drops. Obviously you want to be playing this with soft. If there was a Nicol Bolas or Ravager or something like that, I'd be a lot more excited about this card. But oh man, the fact people are saying this answer's Uro, I'm it's the most you're not wrong thing that it's just, I
mean, yeah, it technically removes Uro after they've gotten a ton of value out of your Uro, or hey, if you're going to preemptively cast this to get rid of the Uro I haven't brought back yet.
Yeah, it's just, what are we doing here? What are we doing here?
It's 5 mana.
I know, that's what I think. It's a board wipe that you think would be good against aggro because it hits the small things, but it costs 5. It's just not good. I don't think it's good. It could see a little play, but I still don't think it's good.
Yeah, same. So what do we think for underrated cards?
Well, I'm just going to say, yeah.
I have to do my overrated.
Oh, yeah, you do your overrated. Then let's hit that one.
Shadow's Verdict. I mean, this might be blasphemous. I think Nighthawk Scavenger.
Really?
Which is 1 black for a 1+ star/3 vampire rogue with flying, death touch, lifelink. Nighthawk Scavenger's power is equal to 1 plus the number of card types among cards in your opponent's graveyards. So this card, obviously, it calls back to Vampire Nighthawk. It also calls back to Tarmogoyf, which is a really good comparison, right? If you told me that I was going to get a flying, death touch, lifelink Tarmogoyf with with 2 relevant creature types for 3 mana, I probably would sign up for that, right? That sounds amazing. My problem with this card is that I think that that's not where Magic is right now. I don't think I'm very interested in a ball of stats for 3 mana. I don't know how good Tarmogoyf would be right now.
That's sad, but you're right.
I don't. It's not good in most formats anymore.
It's good in Legacy. It's good in Legacy. I'll give it that.
It's good in Legacy, but I think balls of stats, especially ones like 3 toughness, I don't want to play a card that's just going to run into the lava axe that much. That is not to say this is a bad card. Like, I think this card is going to be very good in certain matchups. Like in creature matchups, this thing, it has Death Touch and Lifelink and flying, so it's going to win most creature battles. It's going to be a great card if you can give it trample, or if you can give it some sort of effect. I think it plays nicely with the rogue mechanic. But I think we'll also kind of get to – I can discuss it now. I think that the rogue mill your opponent 8 cards mechanic is just bad until Uro gets banned.
Yeah, and even probably bad after Uro gets banned because there's still going to be other escape cards.
Yeah, because Crux is still going to exist. So, like, all the escape cards just make the rogue's mechanic really bad because you're just giving your opponent cards and you're enabling them to cast them for very cheap. So I think that this card kind of plays into that, right? If your opponent is already playing these escape cards, they can just go ahead and groom this card so that it's almost always a 2/3, which is fine. But I wouldn't play Vampire Nighthawk anymore.
Yeah. No, I think this is I think it's premier in the Rogue's deck, but just as you said, the Rogue's deck just ain't going to get there because you just can't do it in a world of escape. And also, like, it's not just escape, it's like any graveyard mechanic that comes around, milling your opponent is generally a bad thing. Like, you don't want to mill your opponent usually. Like, I know mill decks try to do it, but mill's bad, so you generally don't want to mill. You put cards into your opponent's graveyard because usually there's ways your opponent can abuse that. So, no, rogues, especially, and right now that the mechanic of choice is definitely escape for that. It's just like, God, imagine just like milling your opponent, that your opponent just undoes all your work with their 4-mana 6/6 that draws a card, gains them life, and puts them ahead on mana. Like, what's your plan exactly? What are you doing? Like,
yeah. So, like, this card, it reads really well. It reads like a combination of Tarmogoyf and Vampire Nighthawk because it literally is. But it's, I just don't think that's where Magic's at. And because its toughness is always 3, it's always going to be very killable by red removal.
Yeah.
So I just think that this card is in a position where at 3 mana at this point, the card has to be enabling your degenerate endgame, or it needs to replace itself. And I'm not really that interested in cards that don't do one of those 2 things.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't think this card's very good. So
outside of the most aggressive decks, like incredibly aggressive decks can do that. But even incredibly aggressive decks, like you play Annex in red, right?
That card's way better.
It's going to get bigger on the front side faster. Yeah, it doesn't race as well as this thing does, but that card just kills you when you attack on turn 4 and you give it an Ember Cleave.
Yeah, I'm also not even sure that's true. Annex races super well. Like, that Devotion gets ridiculously out of hand, so in a way that cards in opponents' graveyards does not. So I'm not. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's my argument. I think this card will still see play. I think it's still good. It'll still have places. But I think that I've seen people talking about this card like it's the best card in the set, and I don't know what Magic they've been playing.
Not 2020 Magic, apparently. So,
so what do you have for underrated black?
Yeah, this was the card. This was going to be like my runner-up for best card if I didn't go with the removal spells. So the fact we haven't brought it up yet, I'm going to bring it up now. So Skyclave Shade, I think this card's very good. Like,
agreed.
It is basically you compare it to Scrap Heap Scrounger, right? Where it's 2 mana 3 power idiot that can't block and it just keeps jumping in there. Except like Scrap Heap Scrounger, you need to have another creature in your graveyard to exile it, and then it would pop back from your yard. And instant speed is great. But this card needs is lands to come back, which is kind of like, I think it's comparable. Like, there's some scenarios where like exile a creature, the instant speed's better, and there's scenarios where like putting a land in place better to get it back. So I'm just gonna call those similar. So it comes back with a similar rate that Scrap Heap Scrounger comes back, and it also can be kicked. And if you kick it, it's 5 power for 5 mana, so it scales better in the late game than Scrap Heap Scrounger does, and you can still kick it from the graveyard. So this is, I think, I hated Scrap Heap Scrounger. Like, Scrap Heap Scrounger is on like my top 5 least favorite Magic cards ever. So I am not looking forward to this card coming in the standard because it's gonna harass me and my garbage control decks just like Scrap Heap Scrounger did when it was legal. So it's gonna be good and it's gonna make me annoyed, but whatever.
Yeah, for me, so Acquisitions Expert is definitely properly rated, right? That card's incredibly good.
Which one now is
Acquisitions Expert? It's 1 and a black for a 1/2. Oh, it's a 1/2. I thought it was a 2/1. Well, for a 1/2, it's a human rogue. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals a number of cards from their hand equal to the number of creatures in your party.
Yeah.
You choose one of those cards. That player discards that card. I don't know if this card's underrated anymore. It's basically Ravenous Rats.
Yeah.
But better in all cases because it's got an extra point of toughness. And if you have any party members at all, it very quickly becomes a real removal spell. A real discard spell, I should say. It becomes Thoughtseize much faster than you think.
Yeah, don't be dissing my Tribal Rats deck. Don't be doing that with Pack Rat.
Yeah, so I don't know if this card's underrated anymore, but it's very easy to get to a party of 2, and if you're getting blackmail or very close to blackmail tied onto your creature instead of what is that stupid 1-mana discard spell that dealt 1 to your opponent? Vicious Rumors.
Oh, yeah.
If you're getting blackmail instead of Vicious Rumors, that's a significant upgrade.
Yeah, no, I think the card's good. Like, honestly, from what I've heard, it's mostly like this card's like decent to good, and I think it's accurate. I would put it decent to good. So,
yeah, I think that for a certain extent, it read like Ravenous Rats, but the difference of seeing 2 cards or seeing 3 cards versus 1 is incredibly significant.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be pretty well played card.
Agreed.
So now moving on to red. What do we think the best red card is?
Oh, Shadows. Yeah. Damn. God, he said it too early. Oh man, yeah. No, this was actually kind of a tough one because it almost kind of depends on the format that you're looking at with the red cards because the red double face cards are pretty good though. Like there's a lot of really good red double face cards. They're all really good. But if we're gonna ignore all of that, and I'm just gonna say it within the context of, you know what? I'll just go with the one that's probably generally the best here. So I'm gonna say Magmatic Channeler is the best red card, although I'd say debatably the best red card because Magmatic Channeler is a 2-mana 1/3 where if you have 4 more instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard, it gets +3/+1, so a 4/4 for 2, just saying. And then you can tap it and discard a card and exile the top 2 cards of your library, and then you choose one of them, and you can play it that turn. So this is like one of the better blue-red spells enablers we've seen like ever, I'm pretty sure. Like 2-mana 4/4 is super above rate, and even 2-mana 1/3 in the early stages isn't the worst. And being able to like discard cards, so putting more garbage instant sorceries into your graveyard, as well as flipping the top 2 cards. Like this card just churns through your deck. Like putting those instant sorceries in your graveyard, finding what you need, being a really solid discard outlet. Like I think this card, you obviously need to be playing a pretty decent instant or sorcery count to make this card work. But
that's what modal DFCs are for.
Yes, that is part of it too. But this card is very solid, like very, very solid. And like I don't think there's a specific blue-red spells is obviously the obvious home for it in standard, but I don't think it's limited to blue-red spells in that at all. Like I think as long as you're running like a decent instant or sorcery count, this card is immediately in the discussion to be played, and red obviously. But, yeah.
I was actually going to say this was going to be my overrated card, so I'll get my overrated out of the way. But my argument is not actually that different from yours. The only change I would say to what you said about this card is I think that this card is relegated to blue-red spells.
That's true.
So I think that it's not going to be able to get it done outside of that archetype, just because I think that you want a high spell count, specifically a high spell count of spells that cost very low costs, so that you can actually use the discard effect and then play both of them. Because if you don't play both of those spells or cards that you exile, you lose them. So you really want it to be a deck that's really low curve, that's really dense with action. And so proactive spells decks are the sorts of things that you want. Like this would go great in a deck that's playing Shock and Opt for value.
Yeah.
And it's not going to play super well if you're, flipping cards that cost 5, right?
Yeah.
So you generally want to be flipping spells that will be easily castable. And I don't think that 4/4... I think 4/4 for 2 is a great rate if it's a bonus, if you were using it to enable other things. I think if you're going out of your way to set this up as your payoff card, you're doing it wrong. You need this to be an enabler, not the payoff.
Yeah, but the fact that it's both, I think, says it helps the power level. But yeah, no, I totally agree with everything you said there. Like, it is limited in what you need. You need to have that critical mass of instant sources to make this card work, but if you do, it's a really, really strong payoff. Certainly better than most of the payoffs we've seen in recent history, but I feel like I say that a lot. So with like, oh, this is the best of this thing ever, whatever. So yeah, no, it's good, but it's limited.
Yep. So for me, I think the best red card in this set, and might be weird, Cleansing Wildfire.
Really? Interesting.
1 and a red. Destroy target land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle their library, draw a card. So I think that this card is very nice in any format where your opponents are getting greedy. I think that this is a very important check on mana bases that are not playing basics. I think that this is a subtle way to get a landfall trigger. It's 2 mana landfall if you want it. I think that it's a very nice check on your opponents playing value lands, and I think that this is going to see a good amount of play. And it's got a lot of ways that you can finagle it to make this into an actual land, like 2 mana cantripping Stone Rain. Like there are a decent number of ways to do that.
If you ever are casting this card as 2 mana cantrip Stone Rain, it's obviously insane. Like honestly, I was considering it even for Legacy because the best deck in Legacy right now, Team Redelver, runs 0 basics. So against that deck, it is 2 mana Stone Rain, draw a card. So it's very powerful, and it's pretty unique, too. Like, I haven't seen a card do what this card does at the rate it does it for, it's uniquely powerful. So, but yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I feel like, though, in Standard, people gotta run basics still, right? Like, I feel like it's the Assassin's Trophy conundrum, right? Where they just put, like, a couple basics, and then this card doesn't really work out, but...
I mean, I don't know that it's going to work out in like I'm going to Stone Rain you for 2, but I think if your opponent's going to get greedy on mana, it's nice. If your opponent is running a very low number of dual lands, because many of the dual lands in this set are not actually other than the triomes and the temples, there aren't actually that many dual lands that are actually dual lands. So I think if your opponent's getting greedy on mana, this thing can take things out. I really am interested in this in a landfall deck that's going to be interested in the front half for just triggering your own landfall, and then you can backdoor into mana screwing your opponent.
Yeah.
Making a cantrip, a 2 mana cantrip out of this, I think it's comparable in a lot of ways to Field of Ruin.
Yeah.
And I think that's like getting multiple Field of Ruin effects into a deck, I think is going to be interesting. And I think that the degenerate applications of this, like if you can get to them, it's really messed up.
Yeah, like the ceiling's obviously ridiculous, right? So yeah, if you can get there, and the floor is not the worst. It's a little slow, but it's definitely not horrible. So yeah, no, the card's definitely solid.
Yeah, if you can stop your opponent from searching their library, if you can set it up so that your opponent made a land drop already, like this plus that card that I did not like, the blue card, Drowning Conundrum.
That is true.
If you can get your opponent to do 2 land drops, like maybe they activate Fabled Passage or something, or maybe you Field of Ruin them and then cast this after the Field of Ruin, like you can get into weird edge cases.
That would be a fun deck, like blue-red, no lands for you. Blue-red Panza? Oh man. I don't think that's good, but that's pretty funny. I'd want to play that.
What do you think is an overrated red card?
Yeah, there's like a couple that kind of like come to mind, but I'm gonna go with my gut here. I feel like this is going out on a limb because I feel like some people actually say this card's good, but I'm gonna put my foot down here, and I might be very wrong on this. Like, there's a slim chance I am ridiculously wrong on this, and I look really stupid. But I'm gonna take a gamble here and say this card. So for overrated, I'm gonna say Nahiri's Lithoforming. Like, yes, it's a good. It can be a combo enabler for like some stuff, like with that stupid whatever it's called, like what's that?
Oops All Lands.
Yeah, Oops All Lands or whatever that deck's called. But God, this card's so bad on rate. It's so bad on rate, and you gotta like be doing something really weird and specific, and I just don't like it. And I feel like if you're doing something weird and specific, there's better weird and specific things you can be doing. Like, I know there's been a lot of people like rumbling on Twitter about like this is gonna be like another broken combo deck we're gonna see. And I don't know, I just don't see it. Like, this card never puts you up on cards, no matter how much mana you sink into this thing, without help, obviously. If you have helps, make sure, whatever. It never puts you up on cards. it only generates mana if you have like a Lotus Cobra and like hit enough lands to make that work, or like have that 6-drop mythic green guy, which we're gonna get to eventually. Like, it's just the card is so bad on its like just like as a card. Like, yeah, you could do some stuff with it, but like it's just I don't see it. I don't see it. I'm gonna put my foot down here. Like, maybe the lithoforming deck, the combo deck, turns out to be ridiculous, and I look like an idiot for saying this, but it's just so bad. Like, as a card, it's a card that literally you could sink 10 mana into and be down on cards. Like, seriously, like you serious?
So I've seen the Oops All Spells deck in action when it's working, and you kill your opponent on turn 4 or 5 on the spot without them getting to interact with you. So the upside of this card is there. Now, the other thing about those decks is that they're playing a lot of modal DFCs, so they have way more action than a normal combo deck would have. But I think that's going to be true of every combo deck from as long as these cards are in standard, because you're just going to run those modal DFCs. So now the question is the best way to combo with a degenerate lands and landfall-based deck this specific Nihiri's lithoforming? And it might be. You're getting to play a lot more spells than most decks do. But I think that this card, I see the problem here, right? I see your concern. This card does actual nothing if you're not comboing off. You're just cycling through it's like a bad scape shift.
It's a really bad scape shift. Like, I don't even think it's comparable to scape shift how bad this is. So
yeah, so it's a really bad scape shift if you're not comboing off. So it's just a question of, is the combo deck going to get there? And I think that it might.
But like,
I can see the overrated, because it's going to be a fragile combo. You're relying on Lotus Cobra. You're relying on cards that are fragile to survive. And if you don't have Lotus Cobra or some of the other landfall triggers, this card does nothing. It's not going to do a lot.
Like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but don't you need that 6-drop mythic guy that lets you play your lands from your graveyard? Don't you like literally need that card to like?
You don't need it.
How do you win it?
I mean, you're drawing a bunch of cards with the Lithomancy.
Yeah, so, but you're always down cards. So you're always going to be generating less and less mana until you find the, what's it called? Yeah, like you have to, I don't know. It feels like you need a 6-drop to win with, and if you're on top of a 6-drop and then casting an 8-drop, then I don't know what to tell you.
You get Lotus Cobra, you get Rada, you get Dryad of the Elysian Grove, and you have that 6-drop that we're going to read later.
Yeah.
And so with those things combined, you're getting up on mana, you're getting to play off the top of your deck for lands, you're getting extra land drops just off of the creatures and fixing, and then once you can cast land or play lands from your graveyard, then this gets completely broken. Like, these are combos, right? We're talking about this very specific combination of cards, and once you assemble it, you can kill your opponent on the spot. It's a lot like, many of the other combo decks, like Song of Creation decks. Is the sum of its parts going to be worth it? Yes, no. To be determined, but this combination of cards is capable of decking yourself, or not, seeing your entire deck very early on in the game and just killing your opponent without them getting to interact. So the power is clearly there. And it does it without combat. So it's an order of power above like the Gyruda combos and things like that people are doing. So I agree with you. It might be overrated. Like,
I think it seriously is.
It might not be worth it.
I think Gyruda is a lot better than this, because Gyruda was pre-companion nerf, obviously. Because it was just in your companion zone, so you always had it. So all you had to do was get the 6 mana and just cast the Gyruda. That's like good. This is like, you have to have like a Lotus Cobra and like a big 6-drop elemental in play, and you gotta Dryad the Elysian Grove and like Rada kind of help the gears turn, but they aren't actually enablers. So you like need a Lotus Cobra, or you need a stupid 6-drop elemental. And I don't know. I'm not seeing it. And also, yeah, I'm just maybe I need to get my socks knocked off once before, but we'll see. We will definitely see.
Yeah, and I already said the overrated. What do we think for underrated red card?
Yeah, so this one, I'm going to go with Leyline Tyrant here, because this is one of those cards that because you look at this card and you're like, oh, this looks like Omnath Locus of mana. Like, and that card's like a commander card. This card is not good. But this card's like, actually like way better, where it lets you like build up that mana, which is like a marginally nice ability, but it also is just like, the more mana you build up, it's like, it's due to its death ability. So I guess I should read the card through. So it's a 4-mana 4/4 flying, and you don't lose red mana as steps and phases end. And then when it dies, you may pay any number of red mana, and when you do, it deals that much damage to any target. So you get to like accrue this fireball, like at the very least, on top of like ramping in red. And if Fire's Invention was still legal, this card would be absolutely egregious. But thank God they banned that. So.
Oh yeah, my goodness! Like there are so many cards that I don't know how they thought that this was going to be acceptable for 2 years.
Yeah, like Luris and Archfiend's Vessel was the last one. Now it's this card and Fire's Invention. Like they played the stupid Sphinx in Fires, dude. They played that dumb Sphinx. Like you think this is so much better than that?
Thankfully, we don't live in that world.
We do not live in that world. Fires is gone. So they banned it. So
this thing just becoming a bomb, like a literal bomb,
like a ticking time bomb. Like it'll eventually just reach the with Fires, it would very quickly reach the point of this dies, you lose, hit the game over.
And I think that in a red deck that wants this, it probably is like if it's in play for 2 turns, you're in a bad spot. Right?
Yeah. I think it's gonna be very good. Like it's honestly it's almost like a ramp card kind of too, where like yeah, there's because I feel like the cost of like sinking mana into this card to like charge your batteries, if you will, is kind of mitigated. Like the downside of that is kind of mitigated by its death ability, because usually like a card like Omnath, Locus of Mana, you spend all this time charging your Omnath and stuff like that, then they kill your Omnath and all your mana goes poof. But so due to that dies ability, that mana is going to be put to use. Maybe not to get your cast your 10 drop, but it will definitely be put to use. So I think card's it also is good rates. 4 mana, 4/4 flying, very good rates. So I think card's very powerful.
Agreed. For my underrated, I think Wayward Guide Beast.
Oh, that was going to be my second choice for overrated. All right, so let's hear it.
It's a 1 mana 2/2 trample haste. When Wayward Guide Beast deals combat damage to a player, return a land you control to its owner's hand. Let me get out of the way. This is a bad 1-drop for playing on turn 1. You don't want to play this in your red aggressive deck on turn 1. This is a pretty solid turn 2 play, depending on where your curve ends. And it is a very, very good turn 3 play to double spell. So I think that this card, it's not Goblin Guide. People need to stop saying it's Goblin, like comparing it to Goblin Guide. But it is a very solid 2-drop or 1-drop with above rate stats to just like be the thing that ends your landfall curve, because it's going to guarantee you landfall as long as it connects.
Yeah.
And that's going to allow you to make sure that your other 1 mana landfall dude, which is Akum Hellhound, I believe is.
That's the
Akum
one.
Hellhound is getting paid every turn.
It's honestly, I find this card hilarious that it's a 1-drop that is the top of your curve. I totally agree. It's a 1-drop that's the top of your curve. And also the fact that it has trample almost feels like more of a downside than an upside. Because it's like, oh no, I dealt 1 to my opponent, now I have to bounce my land to my hand. Oh.
Yeah, but I do like that it's a way to get lands back to your hand. So I could see this actually seeing play in decks that have a lot of modal DFCs as a way to tutor up your spells in the late game.
Oh yeah.
It's one of the only reliable ways to do that. So I could see this thing having more edge cases than you think. Like, you read it and you're like, this needs to go in aggressive red decks. But I think I could see it in a mid-range red deck. I could see it in just any deck that's interested in getting lands back to your hand at some point. A red-black deck that's playing Agadeem's Awakening. Like, this is a nice card for getting those DFCs back. And I think that that's actually an even better application for it than as an aggro card in some cases. Because I don't think, looking at this set and the cards that came before it, I don't see a great basis for aggression, period. So if it's going to be a slugfest of mid-range cards and going over the top of each other, I want the card that lets me recycle my value.
Yeah, no, I think this card's going to be at its best in like a landfall aggro deck. Like, it is still inherently an aggressively statted creature, right? Like, yeah, you're bouncing your lands, but 1 mana 2/2, like 1 mana 2/2s aren't like, I don't know how much I love a 1 mana 2/2 in my mid-range deck, right? So I know you can recycle double these cards, so there's definitely that, but I still think like the fact that you can just make sure in your like with your Arkham Hellhounds that you're always triggering your landfall every single turn, I think that's just going to be where this card's at its best. So we'll see if that's good enough. But
yeah, and I could also just see it with like landfall decks that just want to be able to make multiple land drops and that aren't very dense with card draw.
Yeah,
it's going to help you there, so you can make a land drop before you attack and then get it back and then make another landfall. I like the haste as a way to just like out of nowhere get a land back.
Yeah.
Like your opponent wasn't expecting you to to have anything, and then it's just like, oop, I guess I got my Shatter Skull back.
Yeah.
Taste it.
No, it's interesting because I think, like, honestly, I can see this team playing Modern because we've gotten a lot of like landfall cheap aggressive beaters like from this set compared up with the OG Zendikar, and you pair it up with fetch lands. Like the landfall beatdown aggro deck could kill pretty fast. Although I don't know if that's gonna be good enough because beatdown aggro has kind of always been like fine but not great in Modern. So we'll see. I don't know.
Yep. But I think it definitely fits there better than in Standard. There's not the critical mass in Standard. So moving on to green, what do we think the best green card is?
Yeah, green. So I guess we could talk about the card that.
The correct answer is Lotus Cobra.
No, I know it is. I would say we could talk about the Green Warden, but let's talk about the Cobra. That's where I was going. So yeah, it's obviously Lotus Cobra. Like that's the best card in green. Period.
Okay, yeah. So Lotus Cobra. So the first part is the quality of the mana dorks has gone down significantly through bans and rotations. Like we used to have Growth Spiral and Paradise Druid basically and Gilded Goose too. I guess we still have Gilded Goose, but that's kind of it's a weird mana dork. It's a niched one, if you will. But like our actual mana dorks were basically Growth Spiral and Paradise Druid in Standard, and both of those are rotating out or got banned. Well, it would have rotated out anyway, so we don't have those anymore. On top of the fact that the mana quality in Zendikar is significantly worse than it was pre-rotation. And Lotus Cobra fixes your mana, and it's a good mana dork. So this card is just going to be a house in green decks. I was about to say green ramp decks, but I'm pretty sure most green decks are just going to want this card. Like, maybe not the green aggro deck, but like, even that deck, I think there's a solid argument to play Lotus Cobra in it. I think every green deck in Standard is going to want this card. Like, come on now.
Yeah, I think that the games where you have Lotus Cobra and the games where you don't are going to look very, very different. Unlike most mana dorks, this thing can attack if you want it to and still generate the mana that you want. This card plays very nicely with all of the landfall shenanigans we've been talking about, just looping lands. It enables really degenerate plays. It plays really nicely with anything that is going to let you make extra land drops. It can make your mana go nuts with just the land drops alone. So it's going to offset some of the problems that you have with running DFCs.
Yep.
So you can have a normal curve even if your lands are entering tapped.
Yep. This card seems like a no-brainer in Standard. This is exactly what you want to be doing in Standard right now. This card is right on the nose.
This is the card that you want with Song of Creation. This is the card you want with Lithoforming. I think that this is what's going to allow all of those cards that were just close to being degenerate to just become degenerate.
Yeah, or even just outside of this, just Lotus Cobra Uro.
Or just do it. Yeah, just do it regular. I think this is another card that you can just play it in a very normal fashion, or you could play it in a really messed up fashion. Yeah, we can move on past Lotus Cobra, because I think Lotus Cobra, it's self-explanatory. So what do we think is an overrated card in green?
Yeah, there's okay, yeah, I think this is definitely the one here. So I think the Tazuru Paragon is the overrated card because I see people oh hey look, it's the enabler for all of my party decks, but no, don't actually run this card. It's 2 mana 3/2 ain't good. And yeah, you can kick it for 5 and make it a little better, but it's just you don't want this is such a trap card in my opinion. Where it's you see you're building your party deck and you're oh wow, this card enables my party, but if you are making a party deck, you want to play good cards in your party deck. You don't want to be playing 2 mana 3/2s. So yeah, don't be playing this one. I think you can do better. You want to play good cards on their own because if you lean too much in the synergy, you're just going to get completely smacked by decks of higher power level.
Agreed. Overrated card. I think Oran Reef Ooze.
Oran Reef Ooze.
So it's 2 and a green for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Whenever the Ooze attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature with a +1/+1 counter on it. So this is kind of your plus.
Yeah.
This is a +1/+1 counter synergy card. I just don't like 3 mana 2/2 that is mostly body. I don't want my 3 mana investment to die to shock.
Yeah.
And I don't like having to wait to attack for it to be above rate because it's just a gnarled mass if it doesn't attack. So I think that it can spiral out of control, but it's like many Hydras and things like that. If you need to wait for it to attack and you need other bodies and other things to make it good, I just am not that interested in Modern
Yeah, no, it's
Magic.
just it just ain't. Yeah, it's definitely not getting there. I'm totally with you on that.
Underrated green card.
Yeah, this this is a kind of a slam dunk for me for the underrated here. Cragplate Balaw. Sorry, I was gonna say Behemoth, but it's Cragplate Balaw. So it's 7 mana for a 6/6, kicker for 3 for 2 and a green. It can't be countered. Hexproof, haste. If it was kicked, it has 4 more counters on it. Like, I have heard literally no one talking about this card.
I
Like,
know, it's crazy.
at all. This is Carnage Tyrant. But like haste. Like, yeah, it costs 1 more, which is not irrelevant. Definitely not irrelevant. But it has so much upside on Carnage Tyrant. Carnage Tyrant was like good. Like, how is this like? This is just like Carnage Tyrant's back in standard now. Like, this is the new Carnage Tyrant. Like the Carnage Tyrant was one of those cards that, like, was it good everywhere? Absolutely not. But it had its niche against making the control decks cry, and it did it very well. So now control decks are going to have to build their decks in a way where they are ready for Carnage Tyrant now again. Like, this is a thing that just exists now. Another stupid tool that green gets access to. And also, I'd argue this card's even scarier than Carnage Tyrant, because the fact that it just clubs you for 6, almost a guaranteed in the control matchup, that's kind of frightening. That's kind of frightening. And if the game goes long, you just get to, like, what is it? You get to 10 mana and you just club them for 10? Like, that's scary. That's scary.
Totally is. Yeah, so my underrated card, I'm going to go with Ashaya Soul of the Wild. So Ashaya is a 5 mana, so 3 green, legendary creature elemental, star. Ashaya Soul of the Wild's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control, and non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. So she turns all of your creatures into forests, non-token, in addition to whatever they are, which allows you to get around land restrictions to trigger landfall. So you can make landfall with just your land drop, and then every creature you play from then on will also trigger landfall. I think that case right there is the way, if you're going to do a fair landfall deck that's not just looping forever, I think Ashaya is a good way to do it. You're going to be able to trigger landfall a lot of times. She's really good with, obviously, Nissa, which is a nice little synergy. But she's going to allow you to do landfall with just kind of weenie creatures instead of having to go through all the hoops of kind of running these loops. And I think that making your creatures into lands also has some benefits in this format, just because you get invulnerability to certain cards that hit everything except lands. It makes it so that they need to go after Ashaya before they can go after your other creatures. And then that's not even mentioning the fact that once she enters play, all of your creatures generate mana. They all turn into dorks. So you can ramp immediately from whatever you were at in terms of lands, plus however many creatures you had.
Yep, really just squeezing that Lotus Cobra dry now, aren't we? With Ashaya, just getting using all the pieces of the buffalo there. But yeah, no, Ashaya is interesting, right? Because, like, it's definitely powerful and it's unique. But thank God it says non-token, right? Because if it just said
thank God it says non-token. Thank God Nissa's rotating.
Yeah. Oh my stupidness. Actually, just forget about Ashaya. Thank goodness Nissa's rotating. Like, that card was miserable. But there's a lot of miserable cards that are rotated. I think once they ban Uro, standard will be okay, maybe. Hopefully, maybe. We'll see. I don't know.
I don't know if I have anything to say about it.
Yeah, but regardless, yeah, Ashaya is interesting because, like, it's very powerful, very unique, but it does have the Dice of Doomblade problem. So, not to say that like disqualifies it from playability, but I feel like this card's fighting a lot with Elder Gargaroth, right? Where you gotta think, like, are there scenarios where, like, I want this over Elder Gargaroth? Because I think Gargaroth is like the 5 mana green thick value creature. So I don't know. Like, I'm not saying there aren't. I'm just saying that's kind of the comparison I think you have to make, because those cards are so fundamentally similar in their downsides, but very different in their upsides.
I think Ashaya really fights with Ancient Green Warden in terms of which of these cards do you want to play in your Degenerate Landfall deck. And I think Green Warden's probably going to win there, but I think Ashaya asks less of you. You don't have to be an all-in combo deck for Ashaya to do cool things. So I think that it's just... Oh, also you can play that with Lithoforming, can't you, and sack your creatures.
Yeah, you can do that. You can do that. I don't know how good that is, but you can do it.
I have no idea how good that is, but it's a thing you can do. So I think that I'm just hearing no one talk about this card, and I see a lot of potential there. So I don't know that it's going to see a lot of play, but I think that it deserves a look. There's some degenerate stuff it can get up to, and it might be the 5th most degenerate thing you can do, so it sees no play, but I think it's at least got a chance. So moving on to multicolor, let's try to keep these brisk because we could talk about every multicolor card. They're always way too powerful. What do we think is the best multicolor card?
Yeah, I think this one's super easy for me.
It's Omnath, Locus of
It
Creation.
is Omnath. Yep, that's the one.
He's red, green, white, and blue for a 4/4. When Omnath, Locus of Creation, enters the battlefield, draw a card. Omnath has added an additional color. Landfall, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 4 life. If this is the first time this ability resolved this turn, if it's the second time, add red, green, white,
All
blue.
those colors.
If it's the third time, he deals 4 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker you don't control.
This card is so good. Like, on rate, like, obviously this card is just bonkers. Like, it's 4 colors. Like, that's the point, right? Like, you get this bonkers good rate card, but you have to be playing 4 different colors to be playing it. That's, like, the idea behind it. But, like, this also just plays into, like, exactly what you want to be doing in Standard right now. Like, what makes Omnath so good, or what makes it gel so well with what you want to be doing in Standard is this is the card you use to get ahead in the Euro mirrors. This is in Euro colors. You're in green and blue, so you're already playing Euro, and this card just lets you get way ahead on mana, so you can start casting your Teamer ultimatums, and you can cast your Euros, and just take your deck and put it onto the table. This is like one of those, like, it's like Risen Reef kind of in that sense, where it's like a card that just takes your deck and put it on the table. Also, I'm super excited for this card in Legacy because this is a non-embarrassing World Gorge Dragon win condition. So I'm really excited to try this one out in 5-color Dragon. So
yeah, and I think that it's worth mentioning just straight up the landfall trigger. How do you race that?
You don't.
Like, Uro already was giving you a life buffer. This thing, every land is gaining you 4 life. Once a turn, at least, you're gaining 4 life. It's just so overbearing.
It's also like you trigger. It's also you trigger. If you can trigger landfall twice, like the turn you play it, you're literally getting your entire card investment back. You're getting the card back for playing it, and you're getting the mana back that you spent on it. So you're getting the whole turkey is being delivered to you if you can get the 2 landfall triggers on the turn you play it.
Yeah, and it's turn 4, so maybe Fabled Passage.
Yeah, and also, you can't do that in turn 4, obviously, but also if you just play it on turn 4, and then your opponent has to answer it, and also if they do answer it, they're down a card, so...
You can if you had a Cobra, or, if you accelerated some other way, you totally could.
Yeah, this card also plays super well with Lowe's card, which is also a card, which is, I think, the exact thing you want to be on right now. I think until they ban Uro, 4-color Omnath Uro is going to be the best deck in the format, almost undeniably, but... Until that happens, but after we can talk more. This card's really powerful. Just rates.
Agreed. So, most overrated multicolor card.
Yeah, there's a few, but there's a few that I think the one that I'm gonna go with because people have actually been saying this card is I think the Giri is a little bit overrated. Where it's good with Winota. It's very good with Winota, but Winota makes tons of garbage cards good. So it's I don't know. You have to be playing, in order to really make Nahiri work, you have to be playing a ton of equipment. And, there's no real equipment. I'm really excited to be playing in Standard right now. Because, we Colossus Hammer, if that was legal, whole different story. But it's not. So, yeah, you can't do that. And, there's a Warrior synergy, but if you don't run equipment, the -3 is actually just blank text. So... It's basically just pumping out 1/1s, and if you don't have equipment, it's pumping out 1/1s and finding Warriors with its -2, which is just kind of underwhelming for a 4-mana walker, in my opinion. But people seem to be really high on this card, so maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I don't know. This is what I'm sticking with here. Without equipment, it's really bad.
Yeah, I think that card is just go get Winota.
Yep.
It's exactly as good as the text, go find Winota.
Yeah, for what it's worth, it does work very well with Winota. It looks at the top 6, finds your Winota, and it also makes creatures that enable Winota, but 4 drops that enable my Winota, I don't know.
I'd rather cast the Winota, if I could.
Yeah.
So, overrated card in these colors. So, I want to say Zero-Sum, but that's not the correct thing. Because that card's broken. That card's really good. It's more the Murpho, it's more the rogue, mill stuff, but I've already talked about why that's not good. So, overrated. I mean, most of these cards are just good. They don't make bad multicolor cards anymore. I mean, I don't think that any of these are overrated.
Hey, if you want to jump on the rogue train, you can say Sorry Thought Thief. That's definitely that's people saying that card's good.
They are? Okay, so yeah, Soaring Thought Thief then. Okay, it's a blue and a black for a 1/3. human rogue, flash flying. As long as your opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, rogues you control get +1/+0. Whenever one or more rogues you control attack, each opponent mills 2 cards. Okay, yeah, perfect. Thank you, Kyle. I don't want to play this 1/3 flash flying for 2 that has this flavor text about 8 or more cards in your opponent's graveyard, and I don't want to be enabling my opponent's Uros and escapes. I don't want to do any of this. It's very cute. I think that it's very flavorful. Once escape rotates, maybe in a year, we can revisit these cards and they'll be good. But I really, really don't want to do this as long as escape is in the format.
Yeah.
However, I guess I don't think Zerasan is underrated. I just want to talk about this card because I think if you're going to be looking at a card that single-handedly makes an archetype all by itself, it's Zerasan with rogues. I don't think the rogue, that mechanic of milling is good, but I think that this card just getting to ninjutsu off of rogues, and so it's 3 blue-black for a 4/4 flash merfolk rogue legendary creature. You can pay 2 blue-black to return an unblocked attacking rogue you control to its owner's hand, so it's ninjutsu, and put Zerasan from your hand into the battlefield tapped and attacking, so you can replace an unblocked rogue basically with him. And then whenever he deals combat damage to a player, you may put target permanent card from that player's graveyard into the battlefield under your control. So he steals stuff from your opponent's graveyard and just gives it to you for free, and he cheats on mana. So, If
this card hits your opponent is really behind. Really behind. This card is good.
It's very easy to play a rogue that's going to slip through.
Yeah, honestly, how bad is this card, running this just, in a control deck? It has flash, so you just play it as your flash win condition. Kind of forget that even though that second paragraph text is very powerful, I feel like this card could just work, even if you don't have other rogues. You just, play a bunch of removal, get your opponent's threats off the table, then you end step flash this guy in, hit your opponent, grab their most powerful thing that you killed. It seems really good. I don't know.
I think you can also just play it incidentally with rogues. There are some cards that are just rogues that you would just play anyway. Acquisitions Expert, I think you could just play anyway. I could see an argument in a blue flash deck for playing Merfolk Wind Robber so that you can get your Octopus turned on, and that thing's a Merfolk Rogue, 1/1 flyer. So, I see a lot of venues for playing these cards, and it doesn't need much setup.
Mm-hmm. It does not. It really doesn't. I think that's what makes this good. It also doesn't mill your opponent. It implies that you want to mill your opponent with this card because it takes stuff from their graveyard, but you don't have to mill them, and that's the beauty of it. So, yeah, I like it. I'm a huge fan of this card. This card seems very powerful, and I'd be very surprised if this didn't see play at least at some point in Standard.
Yeah, and underrated, I don't see an underrated gold.
Oh, really?
Actually,
there's one I had in mind that I think the boar, Yasharon, the Implacable Earth, because everyone always sleeps on Selesnya cards, but this one is wow, it's really good. So it's a 4-mana 4/4, and when it enters the battlefield, you search your library for a basic force and a basic plains card, and put those cards into your hand, and shuffle your library. And then it has a second line of text where players can't pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. That second line of text is so good. Being able to, incidentally shut down, sacrifice strategies and anything with, life pay, which is, what is it called? At least in Historic, the best decks right now are doing both of those things to a large degree. So being able to just turn them off on an incredibly good body that costs 4, which is
it draws 2. Draws 2 cards when you come into play.
Yeah, exactly. It's a 4-mana 4/4 that draws you 2 cards, which is already way above rate. Even if they're just both lands, double Borderland Ranger on a 4/4 is so good, and it's also a 4/4. So actually, it's really funny. Where even if it didn't cost 4, you couldn't because a lot of those sacrifice decks, what they like to do is use Witch's Oven to they use Claim the Firstborn and Witch's Oven to steal it. But even if they steal this, they can't sacrifice it on their side. So this card is muy bueno against those sacrifice decks, and it's also, I think it's gonna be a really good tool for control decks, Bant Control, Niv to Light kind of stuff. This is gonna be in the deck now. This card is super, super, super solid.
Messes up fetch lands.
Yep. Oh yeah. In Modern too. Yeah. 1 copy in Niv to Light in Modern. Then absolutely. Wait. So it's Wait, it is actually, in a way, maybe not Nib, Delight, and Modern, because it is two-sided. I know they run fetches in Nib, Delight, and Modern, so maybe not Modern, but card's very good.
Makes all your shock lands come in tapped. It makes your modal DFCs come in tapped, all of them, even the mythics. There's a lot of edge cases that this thing shuts down, so I definitely see that.
Yeah, I just haven't seen many people talking about it. And I'm like, this card is really good and really relevant. So, I think blue-white, I think Bant is going to be where it's at its best. And I love me some Bant decks. So, going to be good there. Good with Euro.
Agreed. So I think, if I had to pick an underrated card, I want to say Kaza Royal Chaser.
Mm-hmm.
That's blue-red for a 1/2 legendary creature, human wizard, flying haste. It has tap the next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn costs X less to cast, where X is the number of wizards you control as this ability resolves. It plays really nicely with the two shout-out wizards that we talked about, those two rare wizards. It plays really well with Rail the Everwise. It plays really well with all those cards and makes your kicker cards, your kicker instants and sorceries very cheap. So I think that if you're going to be making these big swingy kicker plays, this is going to be one of the ways that you do it.
Yeah, card's definitely good. It's almost feels like the blue-red deck almost has too many good creatures to play nowadays. They gotta make some decisions here. Their options are so good in the creature department, but they're kind of whatever in the spell department. So picking the creature, I guess, will be very important going forward for that deck.
I think you pick the rare ones and the mythic ones.
I feel like Sprite Dragon's pretty good.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Don't want to sit on that one.
But I like that this card is kind of a Goblin Electromancer that gets even better if you're casting bigger things. Instead of going wide like Electromancer, it goes tall, which is kind of cool.
It is cool. It's different. It definitely is not. You don't play this in the same deck of Electromancer at all. Even though they're fundamentally very similar cards. But yeah, cards are very cool. I'll be interested. I think I don't know Blue Reds. It's funny whenever we talk about whether or not these cards are going to see play in standard. It's before or after the Euro bans. Oh man.
So with that, I think that we don't need to go over the colorless cards. I don't think they're mostly
fillery.
Yeah, Myriad Construct is really good. That card's going to see a lot of play. All of the rest of the colorless cards, I think, are very commander foddery.
I don't know. I think Forsaken Monument is very powerful. I'm gonna put that out there. I think the card's very good, and it's going to see play in Eldrazi Tron and Modern. But we'll see.
Yes, that card is definitely going to see play in Eldrazi Tron. But a lot of these cards are for very specific Eldrazi decks and Commander, and then Myriad Construct, which is just 4 mana 4/4 kicker 3. If it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each non-basic land your opponent controls, so it could be gigantic. And then when it becomes the target of a spell, sacrifice it, create a number of 1/1 colorless construct artifact creature tokens equal to its power. And it becomes the target of a spell, period, not your opponent controls. So if you want to detonate that thing to make a bunch of 1/1s, you can just do it on demand.
Yeah, I don't know. Seems kind of meh, but, I guess it's better than... I don't know. I can't imagine seeing standard play. If Questing Beast doesn't make the cut, how the hell is this thing going to make the cut? I don't see it.
I'm not sure. I just think that there's potential there to pinata this thing.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how good that kicker ability is. If it gets really big and you can make a bazillion little 1/1s, then maybe. But you're going to need a lot of 1/1s to make this thing worth it, in my opinion. Definitely.
We'll see. I think that it's at least worth mentioning as a card that might be relevant at some point.
Yeah. Also, nice Forsaken Monument, the one I think that's was there any other Eldrazi cards mentioned?
No, it's the only thing that even mentions Eldrazi.
It's you have Omnath kind of in this, skulking in the corner, damn. I got kind of ripped out of this set.
Yeah, there are some vampires that mention, hey, we used to be thralls to the Eldrazi. That's fucked up, huh?
Yeah, but...
Nothing else. With that, I think we're done with Zendikar Rising. Thank you so much, Kyle. We went deep on this one, and I think that this set, we talked about the modal DFCs for so long because we think that they're really, really, really freaking good. And the rest of these cards, I think there's a lot of power here. There's a lot of stuff that I think is going to shake things up. And even though it might not appear as broken as some of the most recent sets that have come out, I think it might be.
Yeah, the double-faced cards are such a wild card, at least in my opinion. They're definitely good. That's not the wild card. It's just how good, as I touched on before. It's just, I don't know. I guess we'll see. Hopefully Wizards doesn't screw it up again. I feel like it's kind of been the theme lately of two broken cards that are just kind of too good, and then they kind of ruin the formats, and then Man, I don't know. It feels like it feels like for like the last year and a half, it's been like they banned something, and then like the next thing on the conga line just comes to the front, and then that's the new broken or like overpowered thing. So if we could break that cycle, that would be great.
I agree. So with that, thank you once again. And Kyle, if people want to watch you play World Gorger Dragon, what again is your Twitch?
Yep, World Gorger 115.
Great. And if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do so at Deep Listens Pod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can also support the show, patreon.com/deeplistens. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gino. Fun as always.
Thank you, listeners. Until next time, peace.